Hi, your editor Game Buddy here. Before we jump into this lovely episode with Sonic the Comic the Podcast, Dave Bulmer joining us to revisit some Sonic CD comic adaptations, to pull the curtain back on a bit woven throughout our discussion today. You see, Falero and Luke devised a cunning plan to prank Dave with some believable fake Sonic history lore, and sprinkled it in seamlessly at appropriate times. We've linked in the show notes all the materials they came up with to keep it going, so feel free to follow along when you hear them bringing up something that sounds just a little bit off. Enjoy the show.
Everybody, and welcome to The Hill is Always Greener. It's a Sonic podcast. It's a show where four friends have chill discussions about Sonic the Hedgehog to distract themselves from the inevitable passage of time and their own rapidly waning ability to relate to the youth. That was intentional. This is, I am Falero. There we go. I'm a podcast man.
I'm Game Buddy.
And I'm Cyberlink.
And we probably should have worked out what was going to happen after that.
Should I do one? Shall I do one now? Shall I do one? Hello, I'm Dave. I'm also here.
Whoa, look at that! Wow, Jake, you sound really different this week. You have a cold?
Yes, that's right. I've regenerated. I died. Sorry, I died because I all the evil from the Chaos Emeralds went into me, and so I died.
Oh, you came out of the egg?
Yes. Yeah, I've got into an egg. I've come out again in my new form, and so here we go. So from now on, or at least this episode, I am like this now.
We got a new head writer and everything. It's weird.
Yeah, so listeners, Jake unfortunately could not be here with us this week, but he will be chiming in a little bit later in the episode. But in his place, we are very excited to welcome Dave Bulmer, Demon Tomato Dave of Sonic the Comic the Podcast. Thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, no problem. I have recently become a sort of roving Sonic podcast. People are inviting me on Sonic things because I know what that is. He's a little blue hedgehog I recognize when I see drawings of him, so people invite me on their podcast. Hello.
Glad we finally got someone on here who can provide that knowledge. We've been, walking in the dark for a long time now.
Exactly, I reckon. No, the actual, for anyone who doesn't know, the actual reason I'm in is I've got a different Sonic podcast. I've got a sort of a Britishy one called Sonic the Comic the Podcast, so that's why I'm here.
It's very good. You should listen to it.
You should. I'm really interested to see how this episode goes because we now have two Archists and two Boomers. It's going to be a nice even split.
Yes.
Now, just to clarify, I am only an Archist by birth. I am
by an accident of geography.
I'm not so much practicing anymore, and I've actually been, dabbling in some of the STC practices lately as well.
Yeah, again, I subscribe to latter-day Archism, so...
Well, you're all disappointing your parents.
We didn't need Archism to do that.
It doesn't matter that you were christened in Knothole River. The important thing is that you're with us now, and you've seen the light of good Sonic. Let's be honest. No, it's good. It's really cool, because the thing about this podcast is I came in here thinking, right, I'm the only British one. I've got to represent British Sonic. But it turns out that these two lads, partly due to your podcast, Dave, yours and Chris's podcast, have actually come around to that world, and I'm really happy about that. That is
the point. Our podcast is basically a sort of evangelicalism for the Brit. No, it's not. It's all jokes. We all like everybody, really. But we do have a different comic, and we did genuinely get quite sick of the fact that the whole of internet Sonic fandom was sort of written in the Archie days, and so people kind of write off STC, even though we think it is better. So we wanted to make a kind of an equivalent thing about it that would make people think that it was okay to take seriously. So that's why we did.
It's about time, because there's a lot of cherry-picked panels out there.
Yep.
I was about to say, I think I have written and deleted several screeds talking about how silly it is to pretend like STC Sonic is any more of a jerk than any other regular Sonic, because you can't just pick out little bits and pieces here, and
Well, the interesting thing, it's not just that it's not just that it's out of context or whatever, because we like to joke. There's a what is it? There's a page of Archie somewhere or something like that where Tails seems like he's a huge jerk, and so we make fun of that. But what it is that the panels that get passed around that make Sonic look like he's a huge dick in the British comic are like, I don't really argue that he's being one in those panels, but generally speaking, the story of that issue is that he had a temporary problem that lasts 5 pages, and the story is that it's called out and he has to acknowledge it and move on and grow. And so it's like, no, what you're doing there is you've noticed good writing and you have misunderstood it.
Yes, I was about to say, I know exactly the Archie Tails story you're talking about. And that might have been one of the ones that started under old writers and was tried to be salvaged by the new Archie writers. It's a bad story. Like, on the whole, it was a bad story that they had to end that way. And so it is the complete opposite with Sonic the Comic. I've been reading and come across all of those panels out of context. And then within, it might have been, I kind of understand the way it came out. The comics were, that's the difference, is they are 5-6 pages of stories, and then you have to wait for the next one. But most of those out of context panels turn back around into like a genuine, well-written moment. The one I'm immediately coming to is when Porker Lewis basically decides to retire from the Freedom Fighters and go.
That's the one, isn't it?
Yep,
that's the one, because people who haven't read that issue have seen the 1 or 2 panels where Sonic is like going, oh, you're weak. You shouldn't be in the group. You're weak, and that's. But the thing is that is a 7-page story about toxic masculinity being exacerbated by pressure.
Yes, exactly.
And it's brilliant. It's one of the best stories anyone's ever written about Sonic the Hedgehog. Yeah. And that's the point. You're supposed to get, all of his friends are like, whoa, Sonic, what the hell? And he works it out, and the strip ends with him saying to Porker, we wouldn't have you any other way.
Yes.
And that is the panel that I trollingly used as the cover art for that episode of Sonic the Comic the podcast.
It really is. It's you have to, and I think y'all have hashed this out on STC the podcast, but you really do also have to have some cultural place yourself. It was, especially for an American, you not only have to go back to the 90s, you have to go back to specifically the British 90s, and just how sometimes you were an asshole to your friends because you loved them so much.
not even sometimes. That is how British men communicate. So I was sitting in a pub yesterday, and there was 2 men sitting at a table, and a third man came in, and the 2 men at the table rolled their eyes and did a big dramatic sigh, and that was touching to me. I was like, oh, look, they're best friends.
Yeah.
And they were, he came and sat with them, and they were great friends, and they had a good time. That's just how we communicate. But the thing is, that Sonic story tapped into the fact and was about the fact that we do that because we are embarrassed to share feelings as men. It's a toxic masculinity thing. It's about relationships between men, and that story was good. Anyway, yes, I've hashed that out elsewhere.
Look, we're all British. We don't know how to express ourselves. The most emotionally connected we can get one another is talking about the weather and how bad the rain was yesterday. It's all bants, though, mate.
Yeah.
Listen to him going on. Blah, 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 blah.
all that to say up top is that if you have not read Sonic the Comic, you should. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
I'll just say this before we move on. We're going to get into a lot of this because it's kind of part of the topic of the episode.
Sure.
But STC Sonic is a case of so many Sonic fans these days are so used to milquetoast, boring shonen protagonist Sonic that anytime Sonic shows any actual character flaws or character in general, it's seen as this blasphemous thing, and it's just, come on.
Well, because and it makes sense. It's understandable, because the thing is, Sonic is a logo, and they have to make sure that that nobody does anything with this sounds more cynical than I'm being. I understand why. I think this makes total sense to me, that they have to be careful that their property, their logo, their trademark isn't undermined by anyone doing anything with it that would undermine that. And that's such a delicate balance. Like, normally, whole advertising teams are put together of experts whose job it is to make sure that that doesn't happen. So they are careful now. They're very careful now. For some reason, in the 90s, I guess because they were just, they were still building the brand. They didn't quite know what it was.
Get him out there. Put him on anything.
Yeah, there just was more freedom to have him do more things. And so naturally, more interesting stuff is going to come out of that. That's why we've got such an eclectic mix of versions. That's why we have Archie and STC at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Or even right now, you have some different television shows coming out. Even have a movie Sonic who is a distinctly his own personality.
That's right. But those are very carefully, very, very you know what I mean? That's not like, this comic writer came up with this week. No, there are teams involved in making sure that goes well. I think that's why it's able to happen now. I think it's just slightly different. That's why old Sonic feels weird to modern Sonic fans. And modern Sonic feels weird to us because we remember what Sonic was, and now it feels like it may have been a bit blandized. But you can see why.
I will freely admit, as much as I enjoy STC Sonic is not my Sonic, but who cares if it's not my Sonic? It's Sonic for an entire generation of older fans. And on this podcast, all Sonics are valid, and you cannot tell me otherwise.
Yeah, that's the way.
There's just so many Sonics, to be honest, at this point.
Yeah, I was gonna say yes. We're very sincere in saying that you can like a game, you can like a Sonic, but I do occasionally say something mean. Like, I wonder if some people who don't like Sonic showing broad characters because the games they grew up with were the ones in the early 2000s when they were 8 years old that
weren't written very well,
and poorly adapted, where everyone's just. But I acknowledge that's mean, but that's.
I thought for a second you were going to say for all those fans who don't like it when Sonic shows a bit of nipple, and I was like, wait.
There are no Sonic fans who don't like that.
I so wish.
It's the one thing that unifies us all.
All this to say that we're going to be talking about some very different versions of Sonic today, because as the third part in our Sonic City extravaganza, we are going to be looking back at 3 different comic adaptations of the Sonic City storyline, starting off with the Sonic Terminator from Sonic the Comic, followed by Go Ahead, Mecha My Day from early Archie, and then finishing off with Genesis of a Hero Part 3, the final issue of the Archie comic, which is... It's a weird thing to think about that we're jumping immediately to the end after really only having done 1 or 2 other previous issues.
I don't mind seeing how it dies. Sometimes reading early Archie, I'm like, I just want this to die.
Yeah.
But it's fine. We'll get into it.
I think it's best to just jump right in and start with the Sonic Terminator, since that was the first one to be released chronologically between April and June of 1994 in issues 24 through 28 of STC. Written by Nigel Kitching, art by Richard Elson, letters by Steve Potter.
God, it's odd to hear that said in a third voice.
I know, right?
Normally me or Chris that reads out those names.
I believe this was the first issue, or first series of issues of STC I ever read. This would have been like 15 years ago, maybe? It's certainly a long time ago.
Oh, what a great place to start.
I'm really trying to rack my brain to see if I've probably seen the panel of the fully revealed Metallix before I sat down to read STC. But I do remember that was a weird barrier to entry because of the format, which is a bunch of stories in a magazine and not like an American style 22 to 28 page comic book. But gosh, I tell you what, right off the bat, the art for STC, and I know I'm preaching to the choir, is gorgeous. Like completely out of a just out of any league that I remember reading comics like as a young kid.
It's bananas how good it is, and it felt like that at the time. We were just looking at these pages, just going, "What? how is this as good as this?"
Yeah. I do like that, even though these first 2 issues don't have a ton to do with the main CD adaptation. It's still just so nice to look at, with the opening with the Grimer and Dr. Robotnik putting we get barely a glimpse of this Shape Badnik taking out this fake Sonic.
Yeah.
Before we jump to Emerald Hill, where the freedom fighters are trying to prevent this raid on the poor Emerald Hill folk.
Kitching and Elson was the dream team for that comic, and for good reason. And it really does show in this. This was like, I think, one of the first cases where you really got to see both of them just firing on all cylinders.
Yeah.
It is a bit of a weird thing for like new fans to just be dropped right into this, though, because you got like there's Grimer, there's Adventures Robotnik. All of a sudden, there's a bunch of pirates. It's a lot to take in.
Yeah,
it is. Yeah, that the one sort of thing that makes it a bit awkward, because what I want to say and what I will be saying over the course of this is that this is the best one out of the Sonic CD adaptations. This is the best one. That is my opinion. But it is complicated slightly by the fact that it basically does start with some other stuff, which is the kind of thing that me and Chris have been a little bit critical of. Have been enormously vocally critical of the Archie comics for doing. And yeah, that is just the case. The sort of preamble to the story is about this other stuff. But then once it kicks off, it's pretty Sonic CD-y.
Yeah, I think that if I were, re-editing this, I would have taken those first two issues and tied them in with the previous storyline and made the Sonic Terminator just parts 3 through 5. But, it does a good job of kind of teasing Metallix as a threat, and it's just kind of setting him up as this ultimate bad guy that Sonic is going to have to inevitably fight in the next couple of issues.
Well, that's the thing. I was wondering where you would want to start this, because in my opinion, basically, the Sonic CD adaptation kind of starts with the Sonic Terminator Part 3. Yeah. But the previous issues are kind of like, well, here's some Sonic stuff, but in the background, there is this Metal Sonic just starting to be teased, and then having, of course, its big reveal panel, which kind of makes it fairly important.
Well, yes, but I would still probably start it at 3, just because I feel like it's pretty common trope to have like the reveal of the upcoming villain at the end of the previous arc as a teaser for the next one. Like that was something that you'd see fairly often in Archie, and I feel like that would have made sense in this case had they decided to edit Sonic Terminator down to just those last 3 parts.
Yeah,
it is funny you mentioned that. I have I'm actually in the process of cataloging my old Archie collection to either donate to somebody or get rid of, just because I don't need all those physical issues. But I am remembering as a child, before I could like afford to subscribe to get it sent to my house, that I would just go to the local grocery store, whoever had a comics rack, and would miss singular issues in the middle of stories and pick up the next one and just being like, I have no idea what's going on, and might never, because it's hard to get those issues.
Yeah, I was the same way. Like when I would get Archie, it would always be, at the grocery store rack or like in the airport right before a long trip or something. Never like in any kind of continuous sort of way.
I will say this about STC, and I don't know if it's, like I mentioned before, if it's because I have transcended as an old Sonic fan and I'm now a fan of Sonic, a Sonic, but I do think that all of the additions that STC made just fit so much better in this like world that is obviously based off of the games than I would say, like random characters that Archie or SatAM introduced. Because I think, like on its face, the Captain Plunder and his pirate teams seems like a weird concept, but then when they drop in and are fighting the combat robots and also this General Trusk fellow, and we know from the previous stories that they're after the Chaos Emerald. It just all blends in, and it's fun stuff. Like the pirate captain's first mate is a guy that is a ghost because Captain Plunder shot him in the head and he stuck around. And I love
and
it.
He's forgiven him. He's not bothered.
Yeah.
He's like, no, that was my fault. Actually,
Filch is great.
That's what you get for taking the last biscuit. It's serious.
there's stuff like that. So I don't even mind that. Yes, this first story and then the next one are mostly involve that because the guys are after the Chaos Emeralds, and so they head towards the cave to grab them. And then when they get them, realize, what is it? Poor Tails remembers that the Chaos Emeralds are filled with evil and might make the pirates even worse. And when Sonic catches up to him, it's the opposite, that they have fully neutralized all of the the naughtiness in the pirates, and they just hand them back over to Sonic.
Peace and love, man.
The idea there, that's all Sonic lore, basically, is that the Chaos Emeralds sucked in all the evil on Mobius, and then one day there was this accident with Robotnik. It's not quite right because it was Kinterbor's machine that made them suck in the energy, but whatever. Yes. It's a funny joke. It's fine.
We could chalk that up to the radiation that affected the rock.
Exactly.
I'm actually glad that listeners of this show will actually be familiar with the concept of the Chaos Emeralds absorbing all the evil, because we talked about the Bibles in length.
Yes.
And the funny fact that was an American thing, but the Americans didn't use it.
They just didn't care. Well, it was because, isn't that weird? It's so weird that in America, like, they had the same branding and they had the same company behind it, but because Deke just came up with something else for a cartoon series, that got to be the de facto thing. It's weird. Anyway, never mind.
Yep.
No. We talk about that. I think they might have shown up in STC first, but the 2 pieces of concept art for the Sonic show with the weird looking Sally and the Sonic kissing the fish, and then like barely anybody used any of that. It is very weird.
There's such a clear through line. Like, it starts off with the early branding stuff. Sonic's got all these friends. He's got the walrus, the pig, the rabbit, the ones from the games. That little squirrel, she's called Sally Acorn. And then from there, it gets developed into that weird one where they're like freedom fighters now. And then everybody branches off from that. That's why we've got freedom fighters in the UK. That's why America's got freedom fighters, but Deke just developed it into a different thing, and that's, Johnny Lightfoot is Bunny Rabbit. They're from the same thing.
Yeah.
God, I've never put that together, but yes, you're 100% right.
That's what it is. SatAM is a development of that.
I mean, Porker's Rota, kinda.
Yes. Or Joe Sushi.
Porker and Joe Sushi kind of blended to create Rotor.
That's,
I do love, before we get to the, the big reveal of Metallix, is just this beautifully rendered panel of Sonic discovering the pirates have basically become, the hippie flower children, and just it's just very good. It's, again, any other piece of media, I would say, wow, these pirates look way too detailed to match with Sonic, but just because it is part of this world, I like it a lot. And of course they just hand the emeralds over, and Sonic gets to hold it over Tails' head that he was right and Tails was wrong. We get a pixel brain in there right at the end.
I don't think I ever actually noticed Filch in that panel of all of them, like, because he's kind of obscured by the inset of Sonic. Like, he's just in that little teeny space on the left. You almost can't make him out. I literally didn't notice him until looking at it just now. I had always wondered, like, why isn't he in that panel? It's weird.
Looks like he's sitting crisscross applesauce in the corner, just getting centered. But yep, this is at the end of this one is where we get the full reveal of the Metallix. I don't think we get his name till the next one.
Yeah, we don't.
No.
Yeah, but man, it's scary.
We take a moment to talk about the name, because this is going to be one of those things that, fans not familiar with STC might be confused about, is that he's Metallix here, the Metal Sonic, and I just think that's a better name.
It's got an X in it. Of course it's a better name.
The entire title is so cool. The Metallix, the Metal Sonic is it's cool.
Well, because if you're writing a story, if you're writing in the game, there's a Metal Sonic, so he's called Metal Sonic. He's not even really called that. Do you know what I mean? He is a Metal Sonic. When you're writing a comic, you want him to have a name, so he's Metallix. Now by this time, it might even have been when this first one was done. Probably not when it came out. I'm sure they'd done it by then. But he was going to be called Metallico. That was going to be his original name, and that is not as good by a long way.
No.
He was going to be in the scripts for the whole thing. He's Metallico, and no, it's good that they settled on Metallix. That is correct.
Yeah.
By the time this book would have come out, we've already had a couple of games that have had different Metal Sonics. You had Sonic 2 had the Mecha, or I think Silver Sonic was he was known for a while. Even in the 8-bit Sonic 2, you've got that little Silver Sonic. Yeah. So you see the logic that there are Metal Sonics, and this is Metallix, the Metal Sonic. So it makes perfect sense, especially not to jump ahead, but when we get to Archie and they f up the name and
oh my god,
call him Mecha Sonic for years when it was supposed to be.
Yeah,
Metal
not just
Sonic.
that issue. It continues.
Yeah,
on
no, that would last for a while.
Okay, well, we'll talk about that when we get to that.
Yes. So yeah, jump ahead to say that, it might be different, but STC got it correct.
It's like it wasn't a mistake on their part. They knew what he was called. They just chose a better name.
They just thought it'd be cooler if he was called it. This is the thing. Now, it is exactly the Metal Sonic from the game. It's the exact design and it's everything's the same. But because Richard Elson is so good at drawing, he has a different aspect to him that kind of is sort of STC's own in some way, even though nothing's actually different.
No.
I don't know how to describe it. It's just, he looks great is what it is.
He looks pointier. He looks he looks sharper and more dangerous somehow.
I would even say and looking at these comparatively earlier issues of STC is if I had to wager an educated guess that he gives Metallix a very similar brow to where he gives Sonic. He gives Sonic has kind of that relaxed brow instead of like the super furrowed that a lot of official arts give Sonic. Right. And it looks to me, even looking at this the panels in the next issue 26 of the fight with Metallix, is that they have similar structures, and so it does give it its own unique, this is an STC Metal Sonic.
And also Metal Sonic's design has just sort of changed over the years in a way.
Oh, definitely.
And so if you just Google image search Metal Sonic, you get this what I think is a slightly odd design that looks a bit more like a flower in some way, whereas original Metal Sonic was very, very pointy and spiky, and that's what Richard's
he's a bit more curved in the art when you look at it now.
Yeah, I think we'll even see that again. To jump ahead, the later Archie is a CD adaptation, but I think it is using the more refined, quote unquote, modern design of Metal Sonic, and it does stand out a little bit.
Yeah.
Although
while we're on the subject of names, Dave, maybe you can answer this for us. We were trying to figure out before the show started, where did the name Miracle Planet come from? Because we couldn't find it in any of the manuals or anything, and I have no idea why they changed Little Planet to Miracle Planet for STC.
I wish I could tell you. I can't. No, we didn't know either. Is it from the European manual?
No, we checked the manual earlier. It says Little Planet.
Right.
Well, you check that, because I was just looking at the wiki, because it's also known as Kiseki no Hoshi, the Miracle Planet in Japanese, apparently. So it might be.
Yes, I think that's what we discovered. That it's translates to Miracle Planet in Japanese, and they just.
Yeah, it seems like that was where we arrived. It's just funny that there is no documentation of that.
It's both, I think. I'm seeing Little Planet and Miracle Planet. But one is written in Japanese. It's written out literally in English, essentially. But the other one, but Miracle Planet is Kiseki no Hoshi, so it's almost like a subtitle for it. It just feels right for it too. I mean, it is a little planet, the Miracle Planet.
Because Never Lake made it into every continuity that I know of.
Yeah,
that is the official name of the lake it appears over.
Just one of those weird quirks, I guess.
But yes, in STC, they never say Little Planet. It's always the Miracle Planet.
I think they might say Little Planet once.
Yeah, they might describe it as the little planet that goes around Mobius or whatever. Or was it in that Sonic's World where it was
It might have been in Sonic's World, early days descriptions of Sonic CD.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but generally speaking, it is called the Miracle Planet. In the same way that, conversely, where I think STC perhaps did the wrong thing, they never say Angel Island. They always say the Floating Island.
It's the same in Archie, isn't it, at first?
I believe so, until, as far as I remember, until Sonic Adventure canonized it. It's no, that's the whole thing is Angel Island. No, it's the Floating Island. Usually big T, big F, big I, proper noun. The Floating Island. That was another one of those things.
Weird that they gave us a clue in the first level of Sonic 3. We just completely... Well, I'm going to ignore that.
One thing I do really like about the first fight between Sonic and Metallix is basically Metallix chucking the rocks at Sonic as a way of sort of recreating him going through the rocks in the intro. It's a really nice touch.
Yeah. They adapt the intro, which I didn't know at the time because I hadn't seen the intro, but they adapt it so cleverly. That tall rock that Sonic stands on and does that incredible, subtle change of poses that's just one of the most wonderful pieces of animation anyone's ever done. Where he's standing there and then he just relaxes slightly. In this, that's what Metallix has put Amy on.
Yep.
And Sonic has to rescue her by whizzing round the thing like he does in the intro.
Yeah.
But in this, it's to cut steps into it that she can get down. Brilliant. And then there's Metallix and he throws the rocks at him that he has to get through like in the intro. It's great.
Can I just say, before we move on to the story proper, that I think I've made the decision that STC Amy is my favorite Amy Rose.
Yeah,
because of her design. I love that it was obviously based on that one piece of Sonic CD official art. And they said, oh, that's just how her hair looks. And I'm like, that's how it should have looked, because she looks, it's her own unique character. And they very obviously, and if I remember correctly, they had a editor change at STC, that Amy is not just the girl.
Exactly.
She has her own character. She still has, bits of her crush on Sonic, but she's just much more interesting. And I know that gets even better when she becomes friends with Techno, but it is such a contrast to how they treated Amy. Basically, as a non-entity until Sonic Adventure.
It's so much better because, like, the sort of canon Amy from Sega, even now, is like, she fancies Sonic, and that's kind of it. She's like a problematic fangirl, I think Chris described her as recently.
Yeah, they've walked that back a lot over the last decade or so. But
in STC, the concept is very slightly to one side, at least to begin with, which is that she finds it amusing to tease Sonic into thinking that she's obsessed with him. And so she'll go around being like, yeah, I love Sonic. And the locals are all like, oh, there's Sonic's girlfriend, Amy Rose. And she's like, no, it's not my girlfriend. And she's going, yes, anything you say, darling, and all this. She's trolling him. And it's so much funnier.
Yes, and also the fact that they give her a crossbow, a bow and arrow.
Yeah,
that is also like radical.
Yeah, and then one of the first things she does in the series is she makes a deal with a sky pirate. Wicked.
That's true in this arc.
So yeah, in a world of I distinctly remember after Amy shows up in Archie Sonic, they basically forget about her for the next 10 years, and she does nothing because they just had no. They had nothing to give her. Like even she, it's not like she showed up in any more games until Sonic Adventure either. So I so much appreciate what STC did with Amy.
Yeah, I don't think cool. Amy really had too much of a presence aside from like the racing games, fighters, and like Sonic Game World, which barely counts.
Oh yeah, she was incredibly rare.
To it, and they did so begrudgingly, just like anything involving the games.
Like in the whole 90s, Amy was only really in STC.
Mm-hmm.
That, you know what I mean? She would pop in from time to time elsewhere, but there were no, for anyone young listening there was no such thing as an Amy Rose figure or anything.
Yeah, she never in the mainline game, certainly, only ever in spin-offs.
Yeah.
And to get like even interesting bits of character for Amy, you would have to go read like translated stuff that mentions she likes fortune telling and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And only now I think has been like acknowledged in like modern stuff where she'll break out tarot cards or explain that's why she has a magic hammer and stuff like that. But yeah, STC Amy is the best. I love her.
You can get figures of classic Amy now, but they're wrong because they've made her look right, the way she's supposed to look, and she's supposed to be based on a misinterpreted drawing from the Sonic CD with the spikes up. And I like that look better.
It is better. The reason that she's so good in STC though is that there's a place for her in it because there was a place for her in the games. Like you had Sonic and Tails, and then like Knuckles as a tougher rival, and then, you know, and this is outdated now, but a girl one. There was a space for that in the cast. There needed to be a girl one, and that was Amy. And then once they'd, you know, given her cursory intro as like damsel, they didn't have anything else to do with it. But in the comic, there was this gaping hole that a girl one could fill perfectly. Whereas in Archie, you already had Sally and Bunny.
They had 2 girl ones.
Yeah. Oh, there's 2 of them.
So there wasn't really anything left to do with Amy. I mean, that's not true, of course, but they just couldn't come up with anything else to do. And so, yeah, that's why she had more of a presence in ours, I guess.
They had a similar, we touched on it, but had a similar problem with Tails in the other media where, gosh, I think Archie introduces like half a dozen characters whose trait is they're geniuses who build things. You have like Rotor and Uncle Chuck and Nate Morgan and et cetera, et cetera. And by the time you get to trying to bring that trait into Tails, it's literally like, oh, okay, I guess he's smart too.
Well, what's really interesting about it is that in the earliest stuff that came out of Sega of America and then kind of really landed here in the Martin Adams books and so on, Sally Acorn is the girl one. So like that actually, you know, that translated to Archie and SatAM, you know, better than it did here, because here, as soon as we had Amy, we just didn't do Sally Acorn anymore. There just wasn't. And Porker was the clever one. Even in some of the really early Bible stuff, they mentioned that Porker's the clever one. We don't know exactly when that started, because there's a missing Bible. There's something missing.
Yeah, we were talking about that. There's like a third one that seems to have informed lots of the stuff in Stay Sonic that we just didn't get. Like, where did Sophocles come from originally? That's what I want to know.
Yes, Sonic and Owls. It's there somewhere.
Yeah. One day it'll surface and it'll be fascinating to... I mean, we on our podcast, we managed to interview James Wallace, who wrote some of the Martin Adams stuff, so Sonic in the Fourth Dimension, and the game books, and, we didn't know this, but he told us, plenty of Stay Sonic, or at least some of Stay Sonic. The problem is he doesn't remember which bits. And and what that means is that he will have had this missing Bible, but he's lost everything. Like, he should probably just deleted it as soon as he'd finished the job.
Yeah.
Understandable.
Because why keep it? Like, why would you ever? But yes, this many years later, he regrets that, because it means that that's just missing now. That's just gone.
Well, how was he to have known?
Exactly. Yeah.
I am immensely thankful that we do have. I have learned so much just doing research for this show of how much has been properly archived, and it does make my heart ache for these small gaps that are probably lost forever. But I am immensely thankful for the people who did. Yeah. You know, maybe even back then thought I should hang on to this.
I don't think anything's ever lost forever, because just in like the last sort of 10 years or so much stuff everyone always thought was lost forever.
Yeah.
It shows up. It just always shows up. Just wait. It'll be somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I never would have thought that, talking about a previous episode, Sega Sonic Bros. Surfacing out of nowhere, like a whole game we didn't know existed. There it is.
I still don't know that exists, so I'm going to listen to that episode.
Oh, yeah. The arcade one. We cover a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
A weird puzzle game that ended up being what we think was the origin of the Blue Spheres music from Sonic 3.
Yeah.
Whoa, okay.
That's the first time it appeared, back in 92, I think.
will listen to that
Crazy.
Also kind of the origin of Ray and Mighty as well, kind of.
What, before Sega Sonic Arcade?
Yellow and Red Sonic, but they filled the same roles almost.
So this is before the Sega Sonic Arcade game?
Yes.
Yeah.
Huh, well, I never. Right, that's another episode.
Yep.
Yes. Well, I do love that the ending of this fight is okay. I do have to say that if I was a child when I first read this, I would have said the panel where Amy says that the two Sonics are too fast to even follow. I would have been like, oh, just like Dragon Ball Z. This is so cool. But I do love that they even do the Metallix come stumbling out of the clearing smoke. And yet for a second you think, oh my goodness, he's, Sonic's been beaten. And then he falls over with his power failure.
Yeah.
Which you think, oh wow, that must be it, until he pops right back up and gives Sonic the old karate chop to the back of the head.
Yeah.
And grabs Amy and runs off to the Miracle Planet, and then we get to start Sonic CD.
Yep.
With the added in the next episode, it starts with this great little idea, which is that everybody else down on the planet, including Tails, because of course he's not in Sonic CD. I've just realised now that's why.
Well, he is now, but
they're all down on the surface, and they watch as the Miracle Planet fades away, because it does. It's only here sometimes. So now Sonic is like trapped up there in what we see in the next panel is this awful mechanical hellscape with all fire coming out of it and everything, and he's trapped up there with this metal Sonic, and he's trying to protect Amy, and it's such a heightened situation for him to be in. You can tell you're in a big, important story.
Yes. Yeah, this is such a good, another just beautiful establishing shot. Like you said, that we've been able to see the Miracle Planet from the ground, that, you know, the fire is shooting out of it. And then you get this beautiful shot of Sonic and Amy just standing in the middle of like you said, just this horrible, it almost looks like organic weeds, but it's all this terrible metal that is obviously, you know, with these big fires, like just burning away at the very earth of this little planet. And it looks painful, but it's such a great establishing shot before Metallix literally leaps out of a piece of the background, like he is merged in with it to attack Sonic and Amy again.
He kind of phases through it. Do you know, there's an interesting point about this. I don't know if you've heard the episode where we covered this, but we found out that in the script, it's that it's described as more like there's all this complicated machinery, and then part of it unfolds and turns out to be Metallix, and he can just essentially hunker down and just like be kind of invisible against the stuff. But that, you know, practically drawing that in a comic, that's a bit like difficult to look at. So he's just had him phase through.
I like how it ties into later when it's revealed that Metallix basically has like unlimited power to like heal himself and continue attacking Sonic because he is connected to the Miracle Planet, which has been totally taken over.
Yes.
So I would even say that him just coming out of it is like, it's almost like they are part of the same contraption.
Oh, everyone, we have a brief invasion here from IDW Sonic artist Abby Bulmer.
Oh, celebrity appearance.
Hi. Sorry, I just wanted to say hello.
Hello.
Hey.
I'm about to go to bed is all.
Oh, right.
I'd say hello and stuff. And you having a good time talking about Metal Sonic?
We are, yes.
That sounds like I'm being patronizing or something, but I'm exactly as interested in Sonic as everyone else, so
of course.
Come along
Thank
and
you.
be a scathing wife for a second.
Yes, we're we only know each other because of Sonic fan forums on the internet.
Yes, that's how we met.
I can relate to that.
Yeah.
Same.
Oh, for certain.
Anyway, good night, everyone.
Sonic connects us all.
Good night, Abby.
Have a good podcast.
Good night.
Will do.
Good night. Thank you.
See ya.
Right, carry on.
Yeah, I love Sonic literally running around the planet to deliver like a full strength punch. It's like it's straight out of the Flash playbook, but it's just so perfect.
Well, and it's particularly perfect here because it is a little planet.
Yeah.
It's plausible that Sonic, you know, it isn't very plausible if he did this back on Mobius. He still might do it, but in an earlier issue maybe. But here, it makes perfect sense. He's on this little planet. He can just nip around it.
Give him a super-powered spin attack that for sure you would think for sure has taken out this robot, but no. I think this is where we actually get where he reveals that, yes, he is continuously drawing power from this horrible contraption and seems to be unable to be defeated.
When you think about it, like, not only have they made Metal Sonic, or Metallix as he is here, look more intimidating, they've actually made him more of a threat than he was in Sonic CD.
Oh, way more!
Quite impressive.
In Sonic CD, he's barely a threat at all. Like, he doesn't hurt you any more than a normal badnik does, and all you do is run a race with him and win it.
He just runs right into a wall. It's pretty pathetic, actually, when you think about it.
That's how Metal Sonic died, was he ran into a wall.
You got better.
Oh, another difference, and like I said, we're going to get to those Archie issues, is Metal Sonic in both of these early ones is talking up a storm. Metallix is the only one that I would say works because he just sounds like a jackass in the Archie issues, because I guess they were trying to say, well, he's a copy of Sonic. Wouldn't he copy Sonic's personality?
Oh, right.
And that's just, let me tell you, early Archies, SatAM, 90s Sonic, personality is not intimidating coming out of a robot copy.
I have a slightly different take on that, but I'll save it until we get there. But yeah, I agree. Here, he is a very intimidating, horrible robot.
Yes, and it's also, and again, people should read STC so they can get to the Brotherhood of the Metallix. It always feels like its own thing. Like, even if you can obviously say, like, oh yeah, Brotherhood of Metallix is how you get, the concept of, like, Daleks in STC. It always feels like it is its own thing, and so it's never just, I am a robot, destroy. It's like, no, Metallix has his own personality, and the Brotherhood especially feels like their own threatening force that is being captured properly in the books.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that what, Nigel Kitching was doing there was writing Dalek stories, and I think he said that, but he was writing particularly good ones is the thing. Like, there are actual Dalek stories that didn't handle the Daleks anywhere near as well as Nigel Kitching did when he did the Brotherhood of Metallix. And that's his concept of, because he's British, so that's the concept of a horrible robot here. It's like, we will get you, we are going to keep coming, and we will simply not stop until you are exterminated. And also, this was, we'd had Terminator 2 not long ago, so this is called the Sonic Terminator.
Right.
Yeah, basically it's just imagine the most horrible robot possible. That's what this is. Whereas, other versions of him, he's wisecracking in Archie, and then, like, Metal Sonic today, we had David Marriott on STCTP, and he kind of describes him as way more of a machine. Like, his Metal Sonic doesn't speak, and is silent, and will kind of do physical communication stuff. And that's kind of closer. That's more like what we had with Metallix, except it can't yell at you, and that's part of what's scary about Metallix in particular.
It is interesting that now there seems to be, we were talking about Sega relaxing story things, is there did seem to be at some time Sega decided Metal Sonic does not talk anymore, even though we had an entire game bring Metal Sonic back in Sonic Heroes, where again he's talking up a storm, but it's very much it's a scary robot, Terminator type thing.
And they specifically change it so it's like, he can talk, but only when he's in his Neo Metal Sonic form from that game. Otherwise, he has to be silent.
It is interesting. I'm specifically remembering there is I think it was a bonus story in a IDW annual that it's about 6 to 8 pages of Metal Sonic, and there is no dialogue, and it fully relies on the artist's ability to project emotions onto Metal Sonic. And I think that is possible, but still to this day, I'm like, you could let Metal Sonic say something cool. He doesn't have to be silent, but it is interesting to see how that has gone back and forth with the character of this robot doppelganger of Sonic. Yeah.
It's interesting how popular a character he is, isn't it?
Yeah, we talked about this a lot when we did the OVA for a previous episode, and I still think Metal Sonic is the superior Sonic doppelganger rival character in that, Shadow has an interesting character arc that's when Sega's not walking it back, but Metal Sonic is, at the end of the day, he is always going to be an immoral Sonic whose sole purpose is to destroy the real one. That's an interesting threat. It's always going to feel high stakes.
I think it's just that he looks really cool.
Yeah, it looks so cool.
Yeah, when you're comparing Sonic's various rivals, like, you've got, Knuckles becomes the friendly nemesis, and like you said, Shadow already has its own thing going on, and then who have you got? Jet the Hawk. Like, come on.
Sorry. I shouldn't have laughed at just the mention of his name. But
it was the way you said it.
Yeah, well, only one of them's got a turbocharged jet engine in his chest.
Yes,
so
exactly.
That's the one I like.
Yeah.
It's a real jet.
I do love, we were talking, up at the top, how STC goes out of their way to implement the games. And so when this little Sonic from the future bumps into Metallix, and then immediately tells the regular Sonic to jump into the shrinking beam from Metallic Madness, that's just great. I love it.
It's great, isn't it? Because how could it be cooler to have a little tiny weenie Sonic? Like, that's just great. We love Sonic, and here's one that's weenie. Brilliant. And that's true in the game. Like, when Sonic shrinks in the game, it's just one of the best things that's ever happened in the Sonic game.
Yes. There's a reason they brought it back in Sonic Mania for every character. It's
I know.
best.
And that reason was the modding community, who have immediately made it so that you can play as Widdly Little Sonic for the whole game. But yeah, in this version, this little Sonic pops out of absolutely nowhere, goes, here, take this. It's a time stone. Jump into this. I'll explain later. Now you're little. Brilliant. Run over there. And he's not telling him what he's actually supposed to do. And Sonic's going like, well, what? What? So I take this stone and what? And he's like, yeah, no, it'll be fine. I figured it out, so therefore you'll figure it out. Off you go. And Sonic just has to, like, run to activate this time stone. And he does some time travel, which, you know, just to lay the seed for potential future discussions, is the most important thing in any Sonic CD adaptation, is the time travel stuff.
Yeah.
Yep.
Carry on.
Yes. Yeah, I do. I love that it is a little bit of Sonic should just trust in his own over self-confidence and not think about it too hard.
Yeah. Which is, you know, that's something Sonic is well used to and suits his character down to the ground. He'll be like, yeah, all right, okay,
Yep. Yeah, it's almost actively hurting the situation that he's overthinking it, because that gives Metallix time enough to power back up.
Yeah.
And but yep, off he goes into the. Looking at this panel now, it looks a lot like the time travel mechanic in Sonic CD.
Yep. And it activates the same way. He's holding a time stone rather than going past or future sign. But come on, obviously you have to do it.
Yeah.
That's such a game mechanic. You couldn't do that. So he's holding this thing. Oh, and I ought to say, we ought to admit that, like, I talk about how it's, you know, STC, certainly in its earlier days, was, like, close to the games. This is not what a time stone is in the games. In the games, they're Chaos Emeralds.
Not at all.
It's a stone.
You didn't make it.
Yeah, it's a
stone
rock.
egg that he's got. And I okay, don't quote me on this. Listen to whatever it was I said in Sonic the Comic, the podcast, because we had the actual information there. But I seem to remember that it's just that Nigel couldn't get any of the time stones in the game, so he was like, listen, I'm sorry, I haven't got any reference material for you, make it up. But that might be apocryphal.
I mean, I'd believe it.
I was going to say, if that is true, especially someone who has played those on different game pads, those stages can be miserable.
They're impossible. I don't know how anybody can do it. You have to get your head...
In the newer version, it's because you can save and quit before time's about to run out and start the bonus stage over again.
You have to get your whole head into a new way of 3D working. Because it's not real 3D, so you just have to, like, learn to predict what it thinks Sonic's position in 3D space is based on two different planes of two-dimensional animation happening concurrently and clashingly with one another. It's crazy. But...
I'm still not sure if, after learning that the prototype special stages were going to be the ones from Sonic 1, except you would fall through them in, like, a pseudo 3D thing, and I don't know what would have been worse.
Oh, gosh. Well, wow. I suppose it would matter how it played in the end, but yeah, weird.
Yeah.
There were definitely also some creative liberties taken with the kind of robot generator thing in the next page.
Yeah, but this is way better than
Yeah,
the game.
like
one.
the game version, you really can't even tell, like, what it is. Like, it doesn't read as a generator in a lot of cases.
Now, I did look this up beforehand, and I looked it up in the manuals and a couple of I'm sure I just ended up on Sonic Retro again, that in the original game they're called robot teleporters, because apparently what they're doing is, and look, it's time travel, don't ask me to explain it, is that the robot teleporters in the past are teleporting all of the badniks Sonic destroys in the present back to the past to be repaired, where they are then still there in the present. Because they're called teleporters or transporters, depending on, like, the re-release. I think the 2011 remake calls them teleporters, even in, like, the achievement you get for destroying all of them. And that just kind of blew my mind, because I sure thought they were just robot generators. Yeah, you send it back to the past so they can churn out robots, so by the time you get to the present and future, everything's ruined.
I
just thought that was interesting.
Yeah. I always thought that, but then maybe I was influenced by this, because the story here in STC is that in the past, Robotnik has set up one big machine, and its whole job is to basically spread. And you can see, you were talking about, you know, it looking like organic vines, but pipes. And that's what you get to see. You get to see them snaking out of this thing, plunging into the ground, digging their roots in. And right at the center of this, to allow it to, I don't know, spread out through time or whatever, there is the time stone. Not just a time stone, because the one that... So when the little Sonic gave our Sonic the time stone and shrank him down, Sonic then went into the past with it, and it dissolved. He hasn't got the time stone anymore. But now he jumps into this machine, and there it is. There, suspended in a light beam, which is something that the STC team like. They do that quite a bit in STC.
Yeah.
Suspended, and
rule of cool.
Me too. I like it as well, and they're right. Suspended in this light beam is this time stone. So Sonic goes, oh, okay, and he grabs it and runs with it and transports, forwards in time again, and then does all the stuff we just saw him do. He, little, encounters a bigger Sonic, jumps into Metal Sonic, bashes him, and they even go as far as to reprint an entire page.
Yep.
It's brilliant. I do hope that Richard Elson still got paid for another page.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering about that myself.
It's the one time an STC reprint was welcome.
Because it's the way it lines up so perfectly. It's the way that everything has now been set up, so now we understand it. And now we don't have to read a different perspective of it. We read the same page, and we get it this time. Oh, the reason he's got the time stone is that he's just got it out of that machine.
Yep.
He knows that the way he got to the machine was by a little Sonic giving him it. He's a little Sonic now, so he does all the stuff and says all the stuff that the little Sonic said to him, shrinks him down. It's brilliant. It's great.
Yeah, I mentioned time travel and it being hard to explain, but this actually, in the span of 3 pages, actually explains it all pretty perfectly.
Yeah.
Because like you said, the time when Sonic jumps back to the past, the time stone disappears, and so you're like, oh, okay, because he is now in this form of the past where it's in the machine. It's very good. Yeah. I do just want to point out, I love this panel of right before the reprinted page where Sonic's rejoining, where you have Metallix is leaping towards Sonic and Amy, and the first thing that pops to mind is the end of the original Lion King, where Scar is jumping towards Simba before he kicks him off. Just this arms wide open, rah.
Oh, you are right. Actually, I see that now.
I immediately think of like Zangief from Street Fighter doing his flat jumping lunge.
He's just gonna flump down on them, isn't he?
Yeah,
I know. Just he'll figure it out once he gets there. But of course, it's where our little Sonic intervenes, and I love how it even comes back around to the oops, we spent too much time talking, and now he's his power is back up, but then the time ripples finally start catching up with the little planet and Metallix. I love this, that it's not just, oh no, his power source is cut out. It's like, no, Sonic says Metallix was never built because of this, and so he vanishes from time itself. He is unmade.
Yeah,
it's absolutely brilliant. There's a problem with it that I think Chris noticed.
Yes,
which I hadn't noticed before, because the idea that I think the comic is communicating here is that one of the things that machine made that spread across the Miracle Planet is Metal Sonic. He came out of that. Mm-hmm. The trouble is he didn't, because we saw him being made by Robotnik and Grimer at the start of the entire story.
Yeah.
And now, so my headcanon, because it's all headcanon, my headcanon is that, no, he was birthed from that stuff, and they just got him and went, brilliant, this is good, we like this. Mm-hmm. Let's program it, let's use it for stuff, let's do tests on it, and that's why they've got the realistic robots on it. Because the other thing is, if they can make that realistic dummy robot that in the opening pages of the whole thing fools us into thinking is a real Sonic,
yes.
Why does their Metal Sonic look like a horrible robot?
It comes down to, for me, it's just cool. It's very cool to have him just
That's what I was going to say. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but have you seen how great it is?
I think y'all... Is it the Sonic and Knuckles adaptation where there is another Metal Sonic that mentions,
you destroyed my brother.
Yeah.
When in reality it was like, no, he was wiped from existence. Why do you know that?
Yeah.
But it doesn't really matter. I think also STC mixes up how long the Miracle Planet is above the lake.
Yes.
But again, it doesn't really matter because that's how it works for the story.
Yeah.
And I think the one that screws it up is the Barf saga, where they go back and forth and just end up like, well, it doesn't really matter that they screwed it up because this story is bad.
No, yeah, this doesn't count. Yeah.
Oh man, that is the end of this first adaptation, and it is a real high mark.
Yeah.
Because
for sure.
like I said before, again, I fully cop to the fact that I have read these recently. I am reading them with new eyes. It is gorgeous, and I love it. It is such a fun adaptation of the Sonic CD story. It even ends on an adorable, I'd say it's adorable note. Like, I'm not a Sonic Amy person in any capacity. I do think it is adorable that the last panel is them realizing that they are stuck on this planet until it reappears again. Just what a cute note to end it on.
The art is great.
Aww.
The story is great because it is actually an adaptation of the game, but without feeling like an adaptation of a game. It just feels, if you didn't know there was a game, you'd just think there was a cool story in a comic.
Yeah.
But also it's a genuine, actual time travel story that does the kind of fun stuff that they do. And it makes for a good... If this had been your first time travel, like, loop logic story, which it may have been mine, I can't really remember now. Oh, wait, no, because we'd already had Sonic in the Fourth Dimension, possibly.
I was going to say mention Fourth Dimension.
Well, it's ambiguous.
Probably
It's
not.
ambiguous when that came out. It's difficult to pinpoint it, so I don't know if I'd have read that yet.
You know, I'm realizing I'm talking about time travel being complicated and not working, but maybe that's just because now I've grown up with so much bad time travel stories in various, cartoons and even, mature media that, I forget that you can just do simple stuff like this that works fine and makes you, slap your head and go, oh, that's so clever.
Yeah, exactly.
And obviously, Metallix would go on to be a much more significant player in later city issues of the comic. I'd argue the Brotherhood of Metallix might be the most iconic thing to come out of STC.
Maybe. Yeah. No, well, no.
That or, like,
Evil Supersonic's got to be,
One of the two.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the one people won't shut up about these days.
For entirely separate reasons, of course. But
yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah, but
Fleetway the evil hog.
But I feel like Metallix is a concept that is immediately understood by and resonates with any Sonic fan. Like, you tell somebody, hey, here's a gajillion Metal Sonics all controlled by one super powerful master unit, they're immediately on board, with no question. It's such a cool concept, and I really wish that they could do more with that. Like, I know there was that one Archie story where they kind of did a Metallix thing, but it's cool, but I don't feel like it's quite the same thing as the real thing,
Oh, yeah, I know. I remember what you're talking about, yeah.
When was that? It was like around 200 something? I forget.
No, that's right. It was about, 10, 11 years ago, because it was their tie-in with the digital re-release of CD.
Oh.
Right.
Right. Now, was it before or after the weird issue where Sonic is lost in space and he comes to the planet with the, Chaos Rubies? And instead of turning into Super Sonic...
That was long after. Like, that would have been that would have been like early mid-2000s.
Yeah, well, they did an evil Supersonic in that, which was interesting.
Instead of turning into Supersonic, he splits into a separate Supersonic and he's evil. And I even remember at that time having access to the internet and people saying, what the hell did Archie just do? Why are they putting, STC Supersonic? And it is a weird, weird thing to this day.
The thing is that the internet's obsession with, like, the Running Wild story, basically, which is one of many stories about Supersonic in STC, doesn't always, sometimes overlooks the fact that what happened later is that Supersonic became a separate person to Sonic. He didn't turn into him. It was someone else. And so that is actually, that's even more STC than it sounds on the surface of it. Him splitting into two separate people like that. That is very much Fleetway Supersonic, yeah.
I could not tell you the origin of that story other than I would bet my bottom dollar that someone just happened to read a Supersonic story from STC and repurpose that into a one-shot Archie goofy story.
Maybe.
Yeah. As opposed to the arc we were talking about, where it's like, let's just do 4 issues that are a straight up tribute to Sonic the Comic. Like, now, it was a wild time.
Yeah.
I think I actually, I actually have that issue. Keep talking. I'm going to go see if I can find it.
Oh boy.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, tangent time apparently.
That was definitely one of the ones that it was, I was a young child getting them from my local grocery, and whoops, we came on the wrong day and I missed one. And so I completely missed out on that whole story arc.
It's one of those things looking back on as an STC fan where you're like, wait a minute, how did they get away with this?
I'm going to snap a picture.
Oh, okay.
Because there was also that one issue where, what was it? I think it's the infamous Archie issue with the slap.
Yeah.
One of the ones John Gray penciled, and he was an STC fan, and so he just snuck a couple of characters in there. And if I remember correctly, once the book got published, I think the editor-in-chief had to say, like, look, nobody's in trouble, but don't do that anymore. But oh yeah, that's it. That looks familiar.
Let's take another look at this one. Yeah, let's just keep again. That's like straight up the Emperor Metallix thing.
That is Emperor Metallix. Sure enough. I mean, he's blue rather than red.
Well, it's basically Neo Metal.
Yeah, it's
Sonic,
the Neo Metal Sonic designed from Heroes.
But he's sitting in a floating throne thing.
I think there's a whole bunch of like. So yeah, it's basically Brotherhood of Metallix without doing Brotherhood of Metallix.
Like I don't know if you've ever read this one, Dave. It was basically like a bad future thing where Sonic gets sent to the future, and since he wasn't around because he was being sent to the future, Metal basically took over, did the Metallix thing where he upgraded himself, created a bunch of clones of himself, and took over. Sonic has to work with what's left of the Freedom Fighters to undo what happened, and all the Freedom Fighters are straight up drawn to look like STC characters as bad future versions. So like Antoine had Johnny's jacket, Sally had Techno's haircut, Bunny was fully roboticized but with like short fuses color scheme.
Oh, wow.
It was wild.
Yeah, Ian just loves everything Sonic, and you could sort of see that.
Oh, it was
here.
Ian. Okay, yes, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to be anyone else, is it?
Ian's one of those guys who just wants to play with all the toys in the toy box.
Yeah. Ian knows everything about Sonic and is not afraid to use it.
The big twist was that Eggman was secretly helping them, but they had him basically operating under the codename Kintabor and sending his messages over a computer because, of course.
Yeah, because that was they had used Kintabor in Archie. It was like his his family name.
Yeah, but
so it
had kind of been phased out by that time. So
yeah, they had a good reason to bring it back for this arc.
So before we move into Archie, I wanted to also share Jake's thoughts on the Sonic Terminator as well.
Ah, yes.
Hey guys, sorry I can't be there live and in person today, so to speak. But I'm really glad that I can at least contribute this way and talk about these comics, because I had a really good time reading all of these. And without further ado, let's just go right into Sonic the Terminator from STC. So this was actually my first time ever reading one of the STC Sonic comics. And it was definitely very interesting. The art style immediately reminds me of some of the more detailed comics that one would see in what we in America here call the funny papers on a Sunday. I both appreciate the detailed artwork of the comics, but at the same time, they also just, because they're so detailed, and I guess because I'm so used to the modern style of like Archie and just other comics in general, they look a little busy to me. And it's funny, I'm noticing like with being analytical with all sorts of Sonic stuff recently, I'm noticing that busy is not always a good thing for me. But I absolutely give full credit to where it's due, because just the detail on some of the villains that came up in this adaptation of the Sonic CD story from these 5 issues, man, there's like a lot of detail in these characters, and it's really interesting to see. And since I'm talking about villains, I gotta give absolute props to the way that they drew Metallix, Metal Sonic here. This is, in my opinion, out of the 3 comics that were read today, this is the most menacing and intimidating version of Metal Sonic in these comics. He looks like he will just raise a town without a second thought. If it was possible to redraw this version of the character in all sorts of comics and media, I'd be all for that, because this is, in my opinion, probably the best that he looks. As far as the writing, I do have some thoughts about it. In general, I like it. I like that it's pretty well paced for the most part. I will say, because this is my first STC Sonic comic, I didn't really care a whole lot about the pirates and all that. I was definitely a lot more interested in the story overall when we finally actually got to the beginning of the Sonic CD adaptation. But once we got there, I really enjoyed the pacing of the events. For example, I really, really liked that Sonic and Metal Sonic, Metallix, just basically when he got onto the little planet, they just got right into fighting. It was satisfying. The way that they fought was really cool. I loved the sort of Terminator 2 morphing ability that Metallix had in there. That looks so cool. And also the time abilities in this comic was really interesting way to kind of use what was in the game and, in my opinion, flesh it out just a little bit more, but also in the same regard using what's just already there in the first place. I felt like everything wrapped up pretty well. I felt like it was conclusive and it was satisfying. The characters are definitely interesting for this adaptation of Sonic. First, I want to say Amy is really cool in this. Like, the fact that she has that little crossbow, that is so cool. The hammer is super iconic, but man, that crossbow is rocking. I also like the fact that when Metallix is about to kill her, almost, she's on death's door basically, and she says, "Oh golly." And of course, there's no way I can't talk about this, especially this being my first STC comic. I finally understand what people mean when they say that STC version of Sonic is mean. Because he's definitely a jerk to Tails and to Amy, especially Amy throughout. Whereas like the Archie comics had just kind of a fun push and pull. He's just straight up a jerk to Amy here. But I also understand that in the greater canon of STC, which I have not read, this is just a small snippet of who Sonic is. And so if I want to get a fuller, more rounded version of who Sonic is, I'd have to read the rest of it, which I'm definitely interested in doing now, because everything I saw, I liked. I still enjoy Archie 290 the most as far as the Sonic CD adaptations, but this is my second favorite. This was enjoyable. It was a whole different flavor, and I very much enjoyed it.
I think we got him. We sucked it in.
See, I just have the biggest smile on my face because, you were joking about STC evangelism, but here is a perfect... I know Jake. Jake is very busy these days, and so we didn't talk about this before. I just love that. Yes, that is perfectly what I would want for someone who sat down to read that for the first time.
I'm glad he had the proper opinion of Metal Sonic's design here.
Yes,
he is the best one.
Yep. I did want to mention at the top here, we've talked about Archie Sonic issues before. You cannot buy them. Please just go steal them. It's fine.
It's always morally correct.
We discovered when reading these old issues that some of the archives you will find have the digital recolors. I've seen on Twitter, John Gray, long-suffering Sonic artist, all-around great guy, explained that at the time these were basically they were digitized and recolored by an outset company, and basically the editors at Archie just didn't seem to care how they looked. So if you can please go seek out scans of the original books that preserve the original coloring and not those digital scans, because I don't think it's too much of an exaggeration to say the digital coloring destroys the art for these. So this issue especially is not exactly a high art, but at least experience the art how it was meant to. So
it's one of those charmingly flat-coloured comics that we used to be allowed to have, and then someone has done that thing that is being done, or there was a phase where a lot of things were getting recoloured that shouldn't have been, and this is one of them with all digital airbrushing, but like really weird, smushy digital airbrushing where it kind of looks as if some of it's been put through weird AI filters and stuff. It's not, no.
But Dave, everything is better with gradients.
The thing is, this is shaded. It's not actually flat colours. It's very odd that it needed doing.
Yeah, the original art, yes.
It's just an outdated style where big, bold colours are used on big patches of space and so on, and it just went out of style. Well, that doesn't mean you should change it.
Don't fix what isn't broken.
Yeah, which we do have the crew for this one. Like we said, this is Sonic Archie issue number 25 of the regular series. It was written by Mike Gallagher. Now this is penciled by Patrick Spaziente, who...
The legend.
Yes, the legend, the myth, the legend. Still does Sonic work to this day. But back in the day, this was... I think he was the main cover artist. He did a couple of full stories. But even being a little kid, I remember seeing this guy's name and knowing this was going to be the top tier of the time. We had ink. Okay, Luke.
I believe it's pronounced Harvey Mercado Casio.
Thank you so much. Colored by Barry Grossman, which, yeah, like we were saying, the original colors here is a nice, subtle, airbrushing with some shading that looks very nice, with letters by Mindy Eisman.
Even right from the jump, the art is just so good. like I said, Spaz is a legend for a reason.
You don't see him doing many of the actual full strips, as a matter of fact. It is a treat, like Jeremy was saying.
Coincidentally, the two big ones I remember is this issue, which is the introduction of Metal Sonic, and then he did the Mecha Madness special, which is the one where Sonic and Knuckles are roboticized and then fight. I remember those designs, some very like Transformers boxes upon boxes of complicated robot designs, and it's just cool as hell.
When I was first getting online and looking at like Sonic fandom stuff, it was 1997, so this had been a few years ago, and like all the best fan artists were the ones who could draw like Mecha Madness. They were the ones. That was what, over in America, that was what was being copied. And still, you know, like kids I knew who, like Jay Axa was a kid I knew on the Sonic internet who could draw like that if he wanted to. And it was like people like that, Don Best, you know, people who could get that style and make a good go of it, even though we were all just teenagers. It's no surprise that they're the ones who sort of went on to actually do it professionally, you know.
In these establishing shots of one of the bases in Knothole, where we see Rotor is tinkering with a new camera that goes onto Sonic's shoes so they can see him exploring all the new zones that are popping up. You know, I'm realizing that I don't know if it was this or before that they have transitioned from drawing Sonic with the Mohawk from Adventures, SatAM, some of the early American promo artwork, to this is a pretty, maybe it's because it's a Sonic CD adaptation. This is a pretty like classic Japanese Sonic design where he's got, you know, the regular spines and whatnot. I just hadn't picked up on that until now, where everyone else is very much like their SatAM designs, even Tails, who's brown here.
Is that a Patrick Spaziante thing?
I think you're correct, yes.
What this looks like to me, and I don't want to put anything on anyone just by guessing, but like, well, I don't want to say a really good fan artist, because that you know, people can take that as a derogatory thing to say fan artist, but this looks like someone who kind of cares more about Sonic than perhaps some of the other people drawing him at the time did. And I think that's just because he looks so Japanese in this. This looks like someone who's looked at the Sonic screensaver and learnt stuff, or who's looked at, you know, whatever was going around at the time, the Saturn artist and things, and has picked up stuff from different sides. This isn't someone who's watched a couple of episodes of SatAM and read some issues of Archie and is drawing that. This is someone who's drawing Sonic.
Dave, your interpretation is entirely accurate, as a matter of fact. That is Patrick Spaziante. Yeah. He loves this stuff.
Skipping ahead to where randomly hanging on the wall of Knothole Village is a poster for Knuckles Chaotix.
That really surprised me, because that means that Archie didn't get round to adapting Sonic CD until after, like, not just Sonic 3 and Knuckles, but Sonic Chaotix was already out. What are they playing at?
I know, this was June of 1995, well after Sonic CD had already released.
What are they doing? Well, I know what they're doing. What they're doing is that it comes as a surprise to them to be called upon to adapt the games at all. They're a comic tie-in from a cartoon series. And this is where all the trouble comes from. They weren't doing Sonic comics. They were doing comics of that one cartoon.
If we want to get really specific about it, they were doing comics of what the cartoon was going to be, where it was a bit more lighthearted and Saturday morning-y. If you watch like the pilot episode of SatAM where it's a little sillier, this is essentially what it was.
Okay, so this brings me to what I was going to say earlier about Metal Sonic. And it also ties in with what we're talking about now with Patrick Spaziante. His art is like, it's not that it's unsurpassed now. Like, I've seen people who can draw Sonic better than this now. But at the time, it was like a weirdly big leap in quality for the art in the comic. Depending on your sensibilities, I happen to like the early, you know, almost Beano-y looking, very, very cartoony early issues of Archie. Mm-hmm. I like that because it's honest about what it is. And my problem here, if problem it is that this artwork is like a different kind of comic than the script is describing.
Yes.
Yeah. They are two completely separate things, and it ends up looking almost ridiculous as like these what were for the time super advanced like drawings of Sonic the way that we kind of wanted him to be, but the script is like boing, I've run into the wall, I've slipped on a banana peel. It's like that sort of thing.
Is there no better example that the artist has perfectly rendered the scary, menacing, evil Dr. Robotnik from SatAM, and it opens with a Wizard of Oz joke? The whole plot centers around that he has reached through the fourth wall and gotten fan art for the Archie Sonic comic book itself to dox Amy Rose to go kidnap her. That cognitive dissonance of here is some, amazing art with this very silly book that is supposed to be based on a video game.
Now, don't get me wrong. I love both of the comics this is. I love the one that's trying to look really well drawn, and I love the one that's just a load of running into walls and slipping over. But they don't go together. They clash very badly. And it kind of made it a bad reading experience for me. This I found very weird.
I think we had a conversation off the show about random Archie issues, and I remember as a kid the full special adaptation of Sonic 3D Blast, I think does a similar concept with this of pairing an Archie Sonic script but with a game. I think it does it much better because there is less of that dissonance, because it's a special that is outside of the main series to where they go to an island. But I remember Rotor's there, Sonic's there. But that is, I love that you said that, Dave, that yes, that both of these things aren't necessarily bad, but they do not complement each other. The silliness of this story and
that's all it is.
The how good this art is with, SatAM Robotnik and a very game-looking Sonic.
Yeah. I feel like I'm going to sound more rude than I mean to be, but I have some problems with the art in this, which is that, but just purely because we've just come off a Richard Elson, where I don't have any problems with the art. And maybe someone who didn't grow up with that issue would, which is fine. But so the page of the Archie Comics post-bag page, what you've got there is 5 good drawings of Robotnik, and they're so animated, and you get the sense that if these could all be frames from a well-animated cartoon. He's got that kind of... I can't remember which one it is now, but there's one classic Disney animator who would do what Pat is doing Robotnik's head here, kind of make it move around and squish into itself as these larger-bodied characters sort of laugh. But it didn't need to be, because all you need here is one drawing of Robotnik, really. It's it's a needlessly high number of pictures of Robotnik standing in the same position next to a fishbowl, talking and talking and talking and talking. And you could do that with a full-page spread and a lot of balloons. And there's not enough going on to make it interesting. So the whole thing has this air of, nearly there-ness. Do you know what I mean? I feel like I want to read something that Pat did a few issues later when he'd... This looks like someone who's, studied a lot, but he's just finding his feet in how to apply it to tell a story.
Do you know what it makes me think of? It makes me think of the CDI animations, because there's so much over animation on people just talking and zooming in and out of the characters. That's what's going on in comic form here.
That's the thing, and when it comes to, there's a lot of extreme poses where something more simple would have done. There'll be people doing, with loads of foreshortening of their hands coming out and their fingers go... Well, I understand that Pat always liked to do extremely interesting finger poses where every finger was off on its own adventure. There's a couple of bits like that, and it's a little bit overwrought, is what I'm saying. And I think that's part of why it feels to me like someone who's a very enthusiastic fan of the sort of thing he's being allowed to draw, rather than someone who's been around the block for a while and has fully got it down. But that's that might be what it is, in which case, okay, great, I'll come back in a few years and see what he does then. So that's not really a criticism. It's just the only reason it even kind of comes up at all is because of how they've picked the right artist to do an important issue of STC. But this is not the script of an important issue of STC.
Yeah. No, it's the script of an issue of Archie.
Oh, sorry, Archie.
Understandable. You
Sonic comic, those are the initials. But do you know what I mean? It's a normal Archie script, and the art is someone who's trying to make the Archie issue because he knows that it's a tie-in with an important game, and it ought to stand out. And they haven't written a comic that stands out, or really particularly has anything to do with Sonic CD, except that back in those days, it would have been unusual, maybe completely unique, to see Amy Rose and Metal Sonic in an issue of this. But looked at from our eyes now, it's How is this anything to do with Sonic CD?
It is just Amy, Metal Sonic, and a couple of the zones. No mention of Miracle / Little Planet. No mention of time travel.
Didn't even
Just
think of that. There's
Nope.
no Little Planet.
Yeah,
Robotnik has built the Collision Chaos Zone somewhere on Mobius. I'd never even noticed that, but there's no time travel. That was what I was alluding to earlier. None. There's none. That's the most important thing about Sonic CD.
At least they got the bit where he crashes into a wall, I guess. Or did they? I think that's the important part.
Really
STC
went to
missed out
town
on.
setting that up.
They
yeah.
do the things that Archie would continue to do until, like, you know, the big reset was that they just say, oh, occasionally a zone, which is a place from one of the games, will pop up, and it's like its own little dimension. And so that, I mean, we've basically described the story on these first handful of pages, is that there are zones from Sonic CD that are popping up. Robotnik has already infiltrated one of them. He's kidnapped Amy Rose and then tells Sonic all about it. So,
Oh, is that what it is? They're popping up. I thought Robotnik had made it especially for this.
I remember
guess-
even the the first issue of Archie Sonic that has Supersonic is might have been where they introduced this, to where they just say no, they pop up on Mobius, even though this is obviously a Mobius that is more akin to SatAM. They just say, oh yeah, occasionally game things pop up.
Isn't that telling, though? That they're like every time something from the game has to happen, it's like, oh, this thing popped up. I guess we'll go into this little bubble over here.
How do we
and get back
explain
to
this
our
thing that
stupid
simply
adventures?
cannot possibly be folded into this comic because it has nothing to do with anything? But he does say the Collision Chaos Zone, perhaps my most brilliant creation to date. So that's why I thought he did it. But then he does his Oz joke, which is what I, the great and powerful Robotnik, have What is that? This script is really weird, guys. I had trouble reading it.
It's very, very silly. So the one thing that actually ends up being very plot relevant is that Robotnik is also dressing up his little assistant Snively in a Robotnik suit so that he can run behind Sonic, and so he thinks Robotnik is always there, which...
Right, that feels like something they did to account for the fact that they have to adapt something that doesn't apply. Why couldn't just Robotnik follow along behind
Just
him?
a major contrivance.
The thing Snively is doing is burning away the path behind Sonic, like Robotnik does in the race in Stardust Speedway.
Yes. Yeah, so why couldn't Robotnik do that?
The idea, as I understand it, is that he wants to make Sonic think that he's following him so that he doesn't realize he's actually at the end of the track waiting to push the button that crushes him with the wall.
This is the most contrived bull to lead to the ending of the Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog show, essentially.
Yeah, that was it. That was what it seemed to be setting up. Like, why...
He has to press the button or the trap won't work, which...
Don't ask why he can't just put the button in the Eggmobile. It's not important.
Why couldn't it... A, that. B, why a button? Why not make it a sensor?
Well, it's something that the reader can physically press at the end.
Okay,
You pay attention to that part, Dave.
The sensor's not going to work. Latency. By the time he gets through it, Sonic will already be on the other side,
Yeah, that is what happens, though. That is what happens.
You got to aim for where Sonic's going to be, not where he is.
It's a funny book, right?
Yes. The way that it ends is that it's like Sonic invites the reader to press the button so that it, goes down on Robotnik, and they Pat elaborately draws your finger, and there's a finger.
Which is making a lot of assumptions.
It's not pressing anything.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. That's true. One key assumption is being drawn here, yeah.
So do you want to talk about the fact that Metal Sonic has a mouth? Because I feel like we needed to get to that eventually.
Yeah, what's up with that?
Sorry. I just need to interject that I've just gone back a few pages, and where Sally is kicking Robotnik, she's saying, "Get away from that button, Robotnik." Yes! And there's no button depicted.
There's no button!
Sorry, continue.
Worth pointing out the endless controversy over this button. But, Metal
Release
Sonic
the
or Mecha
button
Sonic.
cut, Archie.
So Metal Sonic or Mecha Sonic, as he is being called here.
Yeah.
Metal Sonic T.
Oh,
Mecha
yeah,
Sonic
we got to
TM.
talk about that. Because, right, he says, like, the all-new, all-different... I'm not on the right page, but it's something like that. The all-new, all-different Mecha Sonic. But, like, that... First off, A, it's Metal Sonic, and B, that's not what Mecha Sonic is in Archie. That's just Sonic roboticized, right? Or has that not happened yet?
They messed it up. I think Mecha Madness came after this, but...
It did, yes. I think Mecha Madness was around issue 40, so another, like...
But they're still seeming to imply that this is a character we're supposed to have seen before in Archie that's now redesigned.
You have not. The only thing I can recall is there is a pseudo-Sonic robot, which basically looks like a very cartoony, roboticized Sonic. But no, this is the
one that was in Adventures.
He's literally in the cartoon as well.
Yeah.
So.
But no, this is the first time we've seen Metal Sonic, and I don't know if this were they trying to say that, because Archie Sonic also didn't do a Sonic 2 adaptation, so we didn't see that robot Sonic either.
No, it's
and
not
we
that.
would get that eventually.
But it's the way he says all new, all different. Does he mean that he's different from Sonic or from other robots? Or
I think it might just be bad.
It's just the way he says the all new, all different Mecha Sonic. It implies that this is a character. And also Sonic has just said, "Well, I'll be. Look who it is." When he meets him, "Well, I'll be. Look who it is." And he goes, "Yeah, the all new Mecha Sonic." It's like we're meant to know him.
No, it was confusing back then. It's confusing now.
Might just not be a very good comic.
like we said, you've got half of a good comic here.
Well, we didn't even mention that there is a Sonic sends Tails out to do reconnaissance on the zones, and he immediately gets captured and tied up right next to Amy Rose, basically undoing any reason for Amy Rose to be in the story.
Yeah.
Well, they wanted to give you a character you actually cared about, I guess, in peril. So
we at least do get some pretty cool footage of Sonic running through these backgrounds that don't really look like game backgrounds, but it is very nice. I like Sonic's. He just decides to front flip into the big warp. But yeah, they do make it to Stardust Speedway, and instead of racing, start beating the crap out of each other.
Beating the crap out of each other while racing. And I gotta say, I love the 2-page spread. Like, oh goodness.
See, here goes back to, I think, your thesis on the artist being a very, very big fan of Sonic in general before working on this book, because here's a game accurate Dr. Robotnik from Sonic CD in the background like it's supposed to be.
Yeah, I didn't think of that. Yeah, that's not a character in this, is it?
No, not at all.
Nope.
It's worth noting that this Stardust Speedway is specifically like the ending animation Stardust Speedway, where it's all streamlined to look cool.
And that would have been hard. Like in those days, how would you like pause that to be able to know what it looks like?
Probably videotaped it.
I was gonna say, if it was like me as a little kid, you ran your Mega Drive through a VCR to record your own gameplay.
I did that too.
This guy, Pat, draws like a fanboy, and I don't mean that in any disparaging way. I mean, his mode of thinking is like fan.
Are you sure that's not disparaging when you say it like that?
I know it sounds like it is, but as a fan, as someone who has those modes of thought, it's just modes of thought, his priorities, the sort of thing he thinks of. The fact that right here on this double-page spread, there's an advert for the Sega SatAM and a character from Virtua
big ol'
Fighter.
Akira from Virtua Fighter, just right there.
And an SBO. Like, this is someone he's showing off what he knows.
He is also the artist that would hide Astel from the Sega Saturn in various panels he drew as well.
Right.
Probably the only reason people like me knew what an Astel was.
So it's kind of odd that, like, we never encountered him. Like, he never came and hung out online. I've never met this guy. He feels, looking at this, but I didn't realize this until now for this podcast, but looking at this, I'm like, oh, did I know this guy? Was he on, Yerf or whatever? Like, I was going to say DeviantArt, but this was pre-DeviantArt, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Was he on Rat.org? Like, did I know this artist? And no, it's just that he thought the way we did.
All I know is that he still does work occasionally. He did the illustrations for a modern Sonic chapter book from just a couple of years ago.
And I have to ask, given this, is Robotnik getting crushed by the big thing the most repeated gag in all of the Sonic franchise?
Well, it was on the end of every episode, wasn't it?
I mean, there's Adventures, there's this, there's the Sonic the Ride video.
Oh, you're right. I'd forgotten about that one.
Oh, my goodness.
In Sonic Jam. Did he ever get crushed in STC? I feel like maybe in the early days. Something like that.
Oh, probably. I don't know. That would be a bit weird, even for early STC, for him to do just slapstick. I mean, like the couple of times when he ever did, there was like it was like the yearbooks or whatever. There was
like the annual. I remember those little annuals. Yeah, the ones that were like basically little Wile E. Coyote.
Yeah, there was one where he made a Eggomatic that had a big hammer on it, and it got he had got hammered by it or whatever. You know, it's that sort of thing. Don't think he ever got squashed by a big squasher.
I think we've basically exhausted all of the story content from this one because
there isn't any
much really.
There isn't any. It's a load of jokes and people kind of going like, "Oh, holy for holies" and stuff. It's just
I do have to ask though, what is going on with Tails in the last panel?
He is putting ointment on his back because Amy's back spines poked him.
He was tied back to back with Amy, so he's got little spike holes in him. I like that. That was a good bit.
That's a good gag.
Yeah. I interpreted it as it was like treating himself for cooties because it was that time.
No, because if you have to zoom in on it because of the scans, but like it's plasters, it's cartoon plasters, but with like ointment splodges underneath. But they look like flowers, so it's like, what's he doing? Is he putting flowers on his back?
That's actually a really good gag.
That's a good gag, yeah. It's weird, isn't it? Because Robotnik says it out loud. Like throughout this, there's these references to the fact that Amy is a hedgehog and therefore has spikes on her like a hedgehog. And you do have to remember sometimes, like, oh yeah, they're meant to be prickly.
Yeah, he is tying her up and is saying, "Oh, your spines hurt me." Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really weird to see Amy with the spikes completely wrong here, though.
No, it's meant to be teased up. That was the style at the time. I do like they do introduce Sonic's peel out move, which would actually come back in Archie a couple of times as like a superpower type thing. And I do think it's pretty neat that Metal Sonic does literally melt his own body trying to keep up with Sonic.
Yeah. That is really cool. I have a lot of time for that as an adaptation of this bit of the game because he does race him in the game. So in this, it's like, Sonic is so fast that a robot Sonic with a turbo engine melts under the speed that he goes at. That's really cool. I like that a lot.
Yeah, it's a nice touch.
That's really the only part I have no notes on.
Of course, then we do, we skimmed over that Sally and Rotor have been following Sonic's, camera footage the whole time. And
it's meant to be Sonic CD. I don't care what Rotor's doing.
Yeah. And they figure out that Snively is the one following behind Sonic. And so, I guess, like we've already said, Sally parachutes down to keep Robotnik from pressing the button, which, I don't know, we see just a little while later that Sonic is way too fast to be caught under that thing. So, was this even necessary?
The answer is no.
Sally has to be doing things at all times in the comic. I don't know if you've noticed.
We even get the thought bubble from Rotor as she parachutes down the, that Sal is some gal. No wonder Sonic's so crazy about her,
As the issue goes on, Pat's drawings of Sally get more and more anatomically focused.
Yes. That's
the nice way of
putting it. Is that not like the most famous thing Archie is for? Is that eventually everybody just starts drawing the girls like superhero anime women?
Isn't this has to be an early example of it happening though, right?
Yes.
Did he bring this in with this issue? Because
that's possible.
early Sally is a little cartoon character, and then in this she's like just a sort of babe with a big head.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, this would have been, the very start of their third year, so.
Yeah, she has knees. It's weird.
It's really weird. She's got the back of knees. It'd be interesting to track, to track the changing physicality of Sally Acorn.
Yeah. This is almost the opposite problem as STC, because that has a lot of overly detailed characters that don't fit the Sonic character mold. But somehow they feel like separate entities where Sally is supposed to be the same height as Sonic. She is supposed to be a Sonic character. And so, when artists either didn't know, they either make her, a short, squat little cartoon character, or a human woman with furry features and a big head. It gets really weird.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, which they did the same thing to Bunny eventually as well.
I was quite surprised, actually, I must admit, to see in the we've got like the scans of the whole issue here, so it's got even the pages that aren't the comic, including this pro art double page spread where like everyone on the team has a go at drawing Sonic, even the ones who aren't artists, and there's like a perfectly good cartoon Sally from Ken Penders.
Yeah, he's obviously copying Art Mawini's how he draws Sally.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, it's a perfectly fine drawing of Sally, but interestingly, it's the one drawing on the entire spread that lacks any imagination.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the rest of them are drawing like Sonic in situations or weird takes on Sonic, and he's just been like, yeah, I have copied the character model. Here you go.
Yes. Which we have not fully dove down that hole in Archie Sonic, but sometime, someday.
And
One day.
to be fair and balanced, I will say that he has shown nothing but imagination in his interpretation of the characters recently.
Amen.
That is true.
So it balances it out.
Yes.
We laugh because it kills us inside.
Yes. Now, that is issue 25 of Archie Sonic. I do like we do end on this nice splash page from Spezzy and Tay that
Yes.
is basically the first 25 issues of the regular comic. I'm picking out different characters.
There's Pseudo Sonic.
Yep.
You can see him
Yeah.
right
Yep.
there.
Is
There he
that
is.
what that weird Sonic looking down is near the middle? At
The weird
bottom?
chunky one, the weird chunky robot Sonic.
Yeah, the one next to Caterkiller and a weirdly
What's-
colored coconuts.
What's going on with
Rounder.
Sally's outfit there?
Oh, that is Evil Sally.
Oh,
Like,
of
course
it
is.
Yeah.
Speaking
Her
of
hair is
contenders.
tousled. I should have guessed.
Yes. I think that's supposed to be Evil Rotor in the corner, which
Yes,
Yes.
there's
also has some history behind that, but
yes, that's a problematic depiction of what an interpretation of evil is. isn't it?
yes.
Now I look at it. Yeah.
Just keeping future comments in mind, but again, another time, another day.
Well, before we move on from this, this is not the only time that America has referred to Metal Sonic as Mecha Sonic.
That's right. I
erroneously.
forgot about that.
So, there's been lots of stuff coming out lately about, like, SatAM, or, the ABC Sonic cartoon, or whatever you want to call it. And recently, like, it was told that Knuckles was going to be showing up in Season 3. He was going to be the eyes at the end.
Yeah.
But it's also believed that Metal Sonic was going to show up, or Mecha Sonic.
Right.
I actually had this on standby ready for this because I thought it'd be fun to just mention. Except he was going to be Mecha Sonic, and this is concept art, but he was going to be called Skillet.
Oh, Skillet. Oh, wow. Do you know what? I don't mind that. That's a little bit like Metallix. It's just a metal-sounding word.
Gives him a name.
Skillet. I quite like it, I think.
There are some definite choices in that concept art. Like, one of them's obviously just Sonic, but with robot parts. But, some of those designs are actually, like, really intense. And then that last one at the end.
This is for everyone who can't see this, which is everyone listening to this. I will have to
I'll put it
post
in the show notes.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's these fun little drawn designs of Metal Sonic, and one of them's very SWATbot-like, and one of them's just got a little unicycle.
Yeah. The third one is basically like actually Metal Sonic, but let's just not draw him very well.
The thing is, they seem to have just given him like a power ring instead of his little jet thing in the middle, which is kind of a cool idea as a generator.
Yeah, it makes sense with the lore.
But it's weird whenever I see them doing game stuff, because it feels like they want to avoid that at all costs. So.
Especially in SatAM,
Yeah.
Yep.
But we'd have got the second one though, the Arnie one. Like it's just this big, great galumphing Terminator robot thing that does not in any way resemble Metal Sonic. So that's what we would have got in ABC.
It kind of resembles Mecha Sonic from Sonic and Knuckles a little bit.
Yes, a little bit.
Yeah, unintentionally, most likely.
Yeah, well, because that would that have existed? Oh no, it would actually probably around that time.
Well, they were considering Knuckles at that point, so maybe.
Yeah, so it probably did. Well, unless we just had Sonic 3.
Yeah, it might have been like right on the line. It could entirely have been, like complete coincidence. It's hard to say.
I am absolutely
Let's
loving.
be honest, they probably weren't playing
Yeah.
games. So.
I am absolutely loving the fact that those eyes were meant to be Knuckles, which of course they were, but instead, oh no, Ixis Nogus.
Yeah, someone said that, but I think like someone came out recently, one of the writers said, no, it's going to be Knuckles, but Ixis Norgus
Yeah, like
is supposedly it, and that's just not as
I
interesting.
mean, Naugus was my understanding for years and years.
yeah.
thing is, he's not even a villain. Like he's portrayed as a villain, but he's not a bad guy.
Is he not?
So in the actual episode, if you watch it, it's a bit weird.
Another one of those things Archie ran with and made him a true villain.
Yeah. And it's related to Wendy Witchcart from Tales.
Yes, eventually.
But that's going down another rabbit hole.
Yes.
Before we go down
we're
any
gonna
more
go-
rabbit holes, let's hear what Jake has to say about this issue.
No, yes.
Right, let's talk about Archie 25 and what I thought about it. Overall, I thought it was really enjoyable. Reading this issue really tugged at my nostalgia, and it made me pine just a little bit for the old Archie style of art, which is very, this issue is just full of it. It reminds me of some of the comics that I got to read when I was younger. The colors in the line art are very of the time, but also kind of iconic. And it really shows, especially in the character of Sonic, because the way he's drawn and the way he's colored in this, he always just looks so confident, which is, what Sonic should be. But he always looks like he's bearing his chest to the world, like puffing it out and just ready to take on anything. And the poses definitely help accentuate that too. And so it just looks really cool. I also love that the silhouette game has always been apparently very strong in Archie, because I remember us talking about the previous comic and how I really enjoyed some of those silhouettes, and some of the ones in this one are very strong too. Like some of the regular silhouettes with the characters, and then especially the introduction silhouette for Mecha Sonic. It looks really good. He looks very intimidating, and actually throughout a lot of the comic he also looks just straight up menacing, and I really enjoy it. I really enjoy the fact that Mecha Sonic / Metal Sonic, it's Metal Sonic, we all know that. In this case, Mecha Sonic, his design always lends to a very intimidating looking character, and I think that really helps with artists drawing him, because he just always looks menacing right off the spot. As far as the writing for this comic, it feels like a really fun mix between SatAM and Adventures of Sonic, even to the point where at the end of the comic, as you know, Robotnik has that arch that he's trying to smash Sonic with, and then he ends up getting smashed himself, which is basically right out of the credit sequence of every single episode of Adventures of Sonic. If that was a straight up nod to it, then that's awesome. If not, for some reason, still really cool, but at this point I would like to think that it was a nod to that. There's definitely some areas of improvement in this comic. Some of the writing is, it was early Archie Sonic, so it was kind of cheesy. And then some of the art, there's especially one intro page where Mecha Sonic is chasing Sonic on Stardust Speedway, and he kind of looks like he's just a few angles away from a T-pose, just like floating, which is funny in its own right. But again, this is early Archie. In some ways, I feel like they were still kind of finding their voice and their style, even though I think they also really mostly solidified it in the early stages too. I will also say that because of the early style and because of the early writing and art, a lot of the panels look very, very busy. There's a lot of text, there's a lot of colors and lines and details, and it can be a little bit busy and muddy looking at times, but again, like I said earlier, it makes me kind of pine for the old days in a fun way, not in a begrudging way. So yeah, I honestly thought that Archie 25 was pretty good. It's not my favorite of the adaptions, but I still enjoyed reading it. And over to you guys. Also, real quick, what in the world did Robotnik mean by pork boy? Is it that Sonic is a hedgehog? It's a stretch.
Yes, I wondered that myself.
That's a good
I
point.
think that is what it is.
I have to guess so.
Like we brought up, there is a lot of weird 90s slang. Like
Wait, no, maybe it's pork boy because he's a porcupine, like a hedgehog.
It could be.
Well, those are completely different animals. That's erroneous. Don't like that.
Yeah.
doesn't make much sense.
We have talked about the difference between porcupines and hedgehogs
Yeah.
before, and as Jerry put it, porcupines will f you up.
Whereas hedgehogs will make you a nice little cup of tea and invite you into their little house under a tree.
It's true.
I realised I started saying something earlier, and keen-eared listeners will be like, "You never finished saying the thing," which is that I was going to talk about how Metal Sonic talks in this. And particularly the bit where he says, "The only thing you're going to do is eat my dust. Stardust, that is." And it's that moment that I realised exactly why it is that David Marriott insists Metal Sonic should never talk. But it speaks to this thing about the script that, like, people like, oh, doofy duplicate, and like, oh, look at it upside down. The script is bananas, and it's like everyone kind of talks the same, which is in this silly, just this general way, which is perfectly, like, I'm a fan of that in a lot of comics. I wax on about how I miss the sort of comics we had here in the UK when I was a kid, like Buster and stuff, and the Beano and things. Well, we still have the Beano. That way of talking, there's a lot of characters will talk very similarly to each other in that, because we're only out to say silly things and make silly jokes. But when it's Metal Sonic and it's like, oh wow, look at this thing, it's meant to be scary. No.
Yeah, no. There's definitely a reason why in much later Archie issues they went for something a little more in line with like STC metal or Heroes metal, where it's scary Terminator talk 99% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That, by the way, and you've highlighted another problem. I make no criticism of yourself because you would be incorrect there, but I do not like the fact that he's called Metal now. Like, that's his name. Metal.
The culmination of the OVA, where Sonic is tearfully yelling out, Metal!
Metal! It's like calling Sonic the. That's not his name! You've not finished the thing you started saying. It's called Metal what? But that's the problem. Like, that's why STC gave him this name Metallix, and like, because otherwise you do end up saying things like, oh, he must be called Metal.
There were just 3 letters off of it sounding all right. You know?
That is definitely it. It was that OVA that calls him Metal or Hyper Metal Sonic.
Yeah.
And they shorten it down.
I mean, it's fair for Sonic to call him Metal because it's like, I'm not going to call you my name. That's stupid.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the problem. It's when something that definitely, clearly, and everybody understands in the moment is just like, Japanese doesn't really translate very well into English. Like it's a bumpy road getting it to work. So it's going to sound a bit weird sometimes if we didn't get someone who was that keen on like doing a seamless localization. But then that becomes canonized as like a fact. Like it's like if it was an important part of Amy Rose's character now that she had to shave a sphinx. Like, no, that's just dodgy Japanese translation. Don't worry about it. It's not all important.
I think we need to do a deep dive into that. Why did that even happen in the first place? Whose idea was it? Anyway.
It does perfectly go back to why in STC giving him a proper title is A-OK, because that was, that ties into, we were talking about the Sonic Bibles to where I think the people that wrote those Bibles, Madeline Schroeder, et cetera, kind of realized that. And, we've gone over this in that episode, but they realized that it wasn't just that Japanese stuff is going to be awful weird. It was like you've been saying, from a brand centric point of view, they were like, this has to translate better than just this complete transliteration. And so, that is where Metallix, the Metal Sonic, is a full proper title. Yeah. Whereas, shortening Metal Sonic, even Hype Metal Sonic to just Metal, like divorced from 30 years of context. It sounds a bit silly from the outside in.
His name is Metal. It's like, and here are all the other characters. Skin. Here are my friends. Flesh.
Exactly. It's what he's made of. That's not who he is.
Let him show you just what he's made of.
Oh, son of a... walked right into that one.
What was about? Okay. Should we move on to 290, by the way?
Yeah.
This is a great discussion. But...
I think it's about that time.
So this is like the end of Archie. Well, but it was never intended to be the end of Archie.
They even have a next issue preview and everything. Like that whole business came together very quickly from everything I could see.
Yeah, and I refreshed my memory that this mini-series, which is like adaptations of the original games, came right after their adaptation of, it was several different comics, or several different games, with Sonic Unleashed. It was a little bit of Sonic 2 8-bit. It was Sonic the Fighters. And that story wrapped up. And then they went into this, intending this to just kind of tie into, I think it was the Sonic's birthday at the time.
Yeah, basically bridging the gap until they could get some more stories.
Yes, but they fully intended to go back to, regular new Archie stories, and this just happened to be the last book they were ever allowed to put out.
So this wasn't like a separate miniseries. This was Archie.
Yeah, no, this was the main series.
Oh.
Like after they finished the big Unleashed arc, it was just, let's show what the original games were like in this new rebooted timeline. And
a flashback, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah, and which ones did they do? Did they do 1 and 2?
They did 1, 2 CD. Yeah. The next one was going to be 3 and Knuckles.
Yeah, when they're doing the next issue adverts, it's all Death Egg stuff. Yeah, it's clearly going to be Sonic 3 at least, if not and Knuckles.
Yeah, but this was basically just like their big 25th anniversary kind of celebration thing to bridge the gap until the next storyline, which we saw. Yeah. We've seen solicits for and everything. It was going to bring back Honey and have like the wild Sonic Man tokusatsu team we talked about in a previous episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm so disappointed it never happened.
The Sonic Sentai, basically.
But alas, this is the end.
So this was the final issue, Archie issue 290 in December 2016. Written by Ian Flynn, pencils by Tracy Yardley, inks by Terry Austin, colors by Gabriel Casada, and letters by John Workman. And what we have here is a pretty straightforward adaptation of Sonic CD, like no frills.
Oh, and just to bring it all together, the main cover is an illustration by Patrick Spaziante.
Yep.
Yeah. This is harder to get started talking about because it just kind of is what it says it is. It is a comic of Sonic CD. That is what it is. And that's the beginning and end of what it is.
That first page is like a pretty perfect recreation of the intro.
Yes, in comic form. It's almost a bit awkward. Like, you know, like one of those things where it's a comic made out of screenshots from an animated film or whatever.
Yeah.
Screen cap comics are the bane of my existence.
Are they? They don't really feature in my life very much at all.
You'd be surprised.
Oh. And then I look round and there's loads of them creeping up on me from behind.
Oh. I do think the immediate contrast between Archie 25 and this one is that we get in between lots of very nice, like there's no dialogue in these first two pages, just wonderful art setting up this. But then we do get, we introduce Amy, we get to see Sonic, and we get, you were just talking about the early Archie, everyone talks the same because it's that same silly funny, and like the only distinctions are the character might have a funny accent or they're a girl.
Yeah.
But I feel like these first couple pages, we get some nice character dialogue between Sonic and Amy that is specifically their personalities. Mm-hmm. And we even get some of the Amy, first of all, I think it's very funny that she is crawling her way up this little cliff that she has been like desperately trying.
Yeah.
This isn't anything you can do, I can do soon kind of Amy, isn't it? Like if Sonic goes across the chain to the miracle planet, to the little planet, beg pardon, like deliberately to get away from her. And she just like crawls over there in her own good time. But she gets over there.
We get the cute little reference to the fortune-telling cards, which you only would have known if you had a translation of the Japanese manual at the time.
Well, sort of. It was fairly famous by then. That it's.
Yeah.
I think it's a bit overdone now as a thing that like everyone knows about Amy Rose. But yes, it's obviously a nod to. It's like, hey, fans, get it, fans? We're doing everything right this time. And yeah.
Yes. I should mention, because of that, that would have been something you wouldn't have known back at the original Sonic CD.
Yes.
This comic came out to promote, it had been out for a while, but the 2011 remake.
Yeah.
Yes, like you said, that exactly. This is a like, hey, here's something that fans would have known about, and now we're doing it correctly, just like you said.
That's it, exactly. I mean, I remember writing the tarot thing into like fan comics back in the Sonic Adventure 1 sort of era, but we were weird online people by this time. Here it is entering a sort of mainstream.
But now the comic is being made by weird online people. It all comes together.
So this is a very game accurate. Like it's all exactly. The art style is great and matches it very well without copying it directly. It all looks right. It all covers everything. They mention everything that you need to know from the game. But I still prefer the STC version, even though this is more technically accurate. And the reason being is that what the STC version did, and I have to acknowledge the reason being perhaps that I grew up with it. You have to acknowledge that. But
of course,
trying to look at it objectively. The STC version takes sort of like the key things from the game and goes, okay, how do we make that a story? How do we tie that together? Mm-hmm. This is hampered a bit by the format that it is, which is that it's part of this series where, and I haven't read the others, but presumably they do a similar thing to this, where it's like, we are going to show the game, kind of like when a game is adapted in a manga, like the official Zelda mangas and things like that, where essentially it's a little bit like if you videotaped yourself playing the game while doing a running commentary. So Sonic's going along going like, whoa, look at that, and oh, I'm going through time. You know what I mean? It's sort of dialogue put onto the game, which I find less satisfying than in Sonic CD, where it makes it into a little story and there's that time loop and things like that. I think that plays with the same thing in a way that just satisfies me more. But this is way more accurate. This is the name of the game here is to be like, check it out. Look. And the tarot cards are one example of that, but everything in it, every panel is one of those. Look what we did. It's here. It's all here.
You skip forward and Eggman is literally in the first boss as he's yelling it, which I think part of that also is the issue literally does end with, you want to see the rest of the story? Play Sonic CD.
That really annoyed me. I was just getting into it. And then they go like, so how does the story... Because he's like, we've got to collect the time stones. And I'm like, here we go. Time travel stuff coming up. And then they're just like, now play the game to find out what happens in the rest of the story. Okay.
They do that a lot in Archie, to be honest, like with the game
adaptations.
And
that is what they did.
Ones.
After the terrible Sonic Adventure adaptation, anytime they referenced a game story, it was literally a one-shot that said, hey, you want the rest of the story? Go play the game, because we're not going to try and shove it into here.
That's such a shame. I want them to take ages, issues and issues and issues to fully tell all the stories. I think that'd be really cool.
I mean, that's what they say. To be this good takes ages.
Yeah, I think you do. Even I like this issue a lot. I like these. I do think you have to remember the baggage of this was the second soft reboot where they were in the middle of the and you know, again, it's much more complicated than we can get into here, but the legal proceedings that led to the comic being tossed out. But you do even have like Eggman, it is game Robotnik. He is in the boss, but he is talking to off screen. We don't see him, but Snively,
that really
character
stood out to me. Everything is so exactly like, get it? The games. So to have Snively be mentioned, I'm like, ugh, I don't want that.
And I think where this concept works better, and we did episodes on these, is the 4 issues that adapt Sonic the Fighters and bring in cut characters like Honey, where not only is it an adaptation of Sonic the Fighters where they have a fighting tournament for a Chaos Emerald, but they also introduce Breezy, a character from Adventures of Sonic, but then to introduce her, have a flashback that is taking place in zones in Sonic 2 8-bit. So it's not necessarily doing what this comic is doing, which is, like you said, here is the game. Here is it looks like it. Here's the story. It is taking like game accurate things and weaving them all to a story that is actually, that whole adaptation comes in the middle of the Sonic Unleashed story where the continents of the world have been broken up. So it basically brought in like toys on a table, like, oh, let's take a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And that is one of my favorite parts of the late Archie, whereas I can see where it kind of falls short here, where, again, like you said, it's very beautiful. It's got lots of fun dialogue, like genuinely, I think, funny and not like the other issue silly, but does have that baggage of they intended this to fit into the, you know, the Archie continuity that was going forward. And so it does have some of that just is, he's talking to Snively. Oh, that's a little weird.
It just jumps out at you because of how this reads like that Mega Drive miniseries they did, where it's like, oh, this is the games comic. And it was just a surprise. But to counter that, one I really liked was the bit where Amy Rose says, like, oh, if you're around, I know nothing bad will happen. But we all know that she's standing in the spot where, in the game, she gets grabbed by Metal Sonic. And it's drawn really recognizably as that place. That's good.
Yeah. I love, I don't know if this comes across in the scans, but I have the physical book in my hands, but there is an ad break in between that and the next panel where
brilliant!
Metal Sonic comes. So it really is, I am now, again, probably from STC the podcast, I'm a big proponent of you got to leave the ads in.
Got to leave the ads in. It's important.
So you get the whole experience.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love there is an ad break between that. So, you know, could have been a commercial or it's just a bit of silence and then here he comes.
All the drawings are really cool. I like them a lot.
Tracy Yardley is amazing.
Brilliant. I did think, I don't want to be harsh on this because what they've done here is a lovely thing and I'm glad they did it. This whole comic, I mean. But it does feel rushed. It feels like they're trying to cram way too long of a story into not enough pages. And that's why when you hit that, like, well, I guess we'll like not finish the story, it feels like it's written up against a tight deadline or something. It isn't. It's just that, well, it might have been, I don't know. But I only say that because it just feels like this should have been a 48-page special or something. And so it is a shame. one of the potentially coolest things in the game, the time travel, is just becomes a 3-page little gag. A good one. I love... It's really cool that we get to see so many pasts and futures, but it is reduced to Sonic just kind of finding out he can travel through time and going, oh, what does the past look like? Oh, what does the future look like? Okay, I'll go back home then. And it feels like if there'd been more time, that could have been a whole thing. Whereas right now, it almost feels like reading an illustrated wiki of what Sonic CD is, you know? It's like, then you go back in time and you destroy this machine, and then you go forward in time and Sonic's going like, oh, look, a projection of Metal Sonic. It's almost like these are the illustrations that should have been in the manual next to telling you about these things.
Yes.
This is why I'm always going to be such a big proponent of Archie's Mega Man comic, because that starts from the beginning and tells the stories of the games. They're given time and they build up the world around it and they build context for it.
That comic was the biggest loss of Archie, not Sonic.
Yeah.
Why did that end up a victim of the whole thing?
I don't think it was selling very well, which is a shame because it was great.
I think it was just a victim of Archie wanting to move away from licensed properties.
Because I said that assuming that they all stopped at about the same time. I don't know when Mega Man was running.
Mega Man stopped a little bit before Sonic, and maybe like Sonic definitely came out of nowhere. Mega Man they set up well in advance that we're going on indefinite hiatus.
Right.
So that got a sort of finale, whereas Sonic just kind of stopped.
Oh god, yeah, I remember like when there should have been a Sonic issue and there hadn't been for a few weeks, and I remember people going like, why is there no comic? Why is there no issue? Is it over? Has it been axed? And yes, it turned out it had.
Surprise.
Yeah. I hate to say, because again I'm holding the physical copy in my hand, that the enormous banner across the top that has squished the cover down, advertising the Riverdale television show, that also extends all the way onto the back of the book, might have something to do with Archie, the company, wanting to divest themselves from licensed properties they do not own, and also the CW show that has been running for, God, very long time now.
I gotta say, another amazing 2-page splash.
Yes, I can't believe we haven't mentioned it. It's clearly a deliberate nod to the previous one. Yeah. And they've gone like, oh, we're going to destroy the previous one.
Yeah. There's even a comparison in the letter from the editor, I believe.
Yes.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very, very beautiful, very pretty.
It is an amazing 2-page, like 3Difization of the whole race from that bit in the game, covered in little references to things that do happen in it. It's brilliantly drawn. It's brilliantly mapped out. It has a real 3D space to it. All the little gags are drawn just great. I've one small critique, but it isn't of the art. It's the fact that in the bottom right-hand corner of the page, there's no dialogue. Well, there's one balloon right at the start, but there's mostly no dialogue. And in the bottom right-hand corner of the page, the last thing that happens, the last detail, is that bit where Metal Sonic smashes into the wall. But because it's just given the same amount of... Do you know what I mean? It's on a page of loads of random little things happening, so... by that time, you don't necessarily feel like you have to be reading this page so much as just like glancing around it and going, cool, cool, cool. Mm-hmm. And I think that moment, because it is the defeat of Metal Sonic, should have been highlighted. It should have happened on the next page, I think. Just
a reminder that Metal Sonic is just a jobber.
Yeah.
When it comes down to it.
It's one of those things that might be too faithful to the games because, he's just kind of unceremoniously smashed
Bang.
At the end of here.
He just slaps into a wall.
I did want to point out this panel on the previous page that's just Sonic standing next to Metal Sonic on a white background. And Metal Sonic just... I don't know, it's just the way it's been drawn. He has the funniest little Playmobil fingers.
Well, and look, Sonic's tweaking his nose. That's got to be an anime reference, right? Sorry, what do we call it now? The OVA?
Doing that
I just love if I was given we've gotten the previous two issues a very mean, menacing Metal Sonic.
Yeah.
If I was mean, I would say, "Oh, this one looks too kiddified." But no, I love he's just standing right there, just
It's
ready
fun.
to go, and
Yeah, it's nice.
it's great. I love it.
This one's definitely got some influence from like the Generations 3D model.
But then right below, you get a nice panel of him rocketing forward with his hand out, with those claws. So.
Yeah.
It's such a good and Tracy isn't trying to, and generally doesn't try to complicate things. It's just the shapes. It's just I've got quite a thick pen. I'm not going to zoom in too far. I've just drawn the right shape to make this look good. It's great. I love this style so much. What I was going to say about this is going back to Metal Sonic hitting the door. What none of this communicates, when you do a comic in which Sonic goes on a race against Metal Sonic and the last thing that happens is he hits in a wall, he runs into a wall and kills himself. That's the end of Metal Sonic. That seems so silly. It seems so cartoony. But what they can't get across, because it's a comic, is that what that is in the game is that, it's the fact that you get through it before he does.
Yes.
Playing the game makes it feel like that was a threat that might have been yours. And instead, you bested it and he ran into it. Finally, this final time. Because you don't beat it your first time. Yeah. So you've had a few goes and then you're like, yes, I did it. And the door comes down. It's yes. But unfortunately, in a comic, if that's the only thing that happens and the first thing that happened and that Sonic just succeeded first time, it's silly.
There's very little threat here. It's just this foregone conclusion that Sonic's winning this. Almost bolstered by your knowledge that you know how this goes in the game.
Yeah, which does speak to the wonderful uniqueness of games as a medium, is that you can participate in a narrative, but see these multiple aspects. And then, like you said, when you succeed, it's like, oh, that was it.
Yeah.
I did it.
Yeah.
I get to push the story forward now.
Yeah, you know what would have happened and what happens the majority of times. Unless, against the odds, you get it right. And unfortunately, translate that into a game. And this goes for all game adaptation comics. This does go for the Zelda mangas and all this sort of stuff.
Oh, yes.
If the hero just walks through the world succeeding at everything, it's a bit annoying.
Well, that just goes back to your point of STC doing something game-like, but its own unique story. It is putting the story before this has to be a game. And, I'm not saying that either one is necessarily the objectively better, but as far as, like you said, the story aspect is, you don't have that in that one because there is a unique threat from Metallix.
Yeah, this is a great handbook, a great companion piece to the game, which, as a fan of the game, you can look through it and go, oh, look at this. Look what I've got. This is lovely. All these drawings of the game I played are just right. But if you want a story, go to Nigel Kitching.
Yeah.
He's telling a story with the aspects from the game, the time travel, and going little. Nobody else seems interested in doing the going little.
Even though, like we said, it made a huge impact on everyone in that game. Yeah, it really does go back to your original point way back at the beginning of it is part of, and I'm making some assumptions here, talking about business, etc. I don't know anybody's thought process at Sega, but it does seem they want this character and to be like the games, but also they want it to be, part of the changes at Archie is this needs to be a quality product, but also has to serve the game.
I like that. That's one of the changes going on at Archie. This has to be a quality product.
Yes, I mean, well, come on. But it does have to serve. Yeah, it is a completely different medium. It is a storytelling medium that is also in service of the narrative of the games, and so you are going to have some sacrifices made, and it's very interesting. That is a very interesting thing to look at some of this media through that lens, to where even where, me and Luke especially, or everybody was talking about, we love this later Archie because it was people who are fans, not throwing everything out, but spinning it into something that is actually coherent, but also, realizing that you could take something like a Sonic CD adaptation and do an entire story and make it fit into that medium better than just saying, at the end, okay, kids, now go play the rest of the game.
That's so frustrating. There should have been a second issue that was just collecting the time stones and doing...
I mean, to be fair, I would have been happy with any issue coming out after this.
Well,
Yes.
At the same time, I do have the utmost respect for the, Ian and the rest of the crew who were told, I'm sure were told by the people in charge, says, no, you've got 22 pages. You got to make this fit. And I would say they made it fit.
Yeah.
so this is this is the last issue Archie put
Yes.
out of Sonic.
Yes.
So the last panels of comic that Archie ever put out of Sonic the Hedgehog was Ratfink going past Dr. Robotnik as a crossing guard because Sonic is a cop now.
In the off panel referencing Waku Waku Sonic no patrol car.
Wow, okay.
I love the last thing that actually happens in the main comic itself is telling you to play the games.
Yes.
It's just like, good point, good idea, actually.
That's enough of this. You're on your own. Does the games still exist, I guess? Bye.
Yeah, I mean, like we said, it was not the last planned issue, and they didn't even get to finish the 4-part that would have ended with Sonic 3 and
It's
Knuckles,
so sad.
which is-
The final page says,
Oh.
next issue, Genesis of a Hero, finale. And it's a obvious Sonic 3 and Knuckles.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
It hurts so bad.
I bet it's all produced. I bet it's all drawn, and we're just never allowed to see it.
There's line art out there.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, I know several artists. I'm pretty sure Tracy included have shared some of what they've been allowed to share. And from what I remember, Ian has been for years talking about wanting to, in some official capacity, release something that would be a companion to explain what the plans were.
I think that Ian is even holding out the possibility of actually like doing some kind of a continuation, because that is something that IDW has occasionally dabbled in. Like,
Yeah.
actually, multiple times they've gone back to like the world of the Marvel Transformers comics and done like sequels and prequels to that, because, it's all their own characters.
Yeah.
And I think that Ian's like, well, I'm going to hang on to this just in case, because either I can get some new ideas for the IDW series out of that, or maybe, just maybe, I might be able to actually, do some of those continuing stories. Like the Metal Virus was a thing originally meant for Archie.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, imagine how we're about to get a sort of, in some ways, for the sort of people we are, historic re-release of Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Wouldn't it be nice if they were like, at IDW, they're like, hey, we've got a cool way we could promote this. How about, let's say, a 6-part miniseries telling the story of Sonic 3 and Knuckles? Just try that.
Yep.
I would not object.
This sort of style, and they just do it as like a proper little series. Be lovely.
turns out adapting Sonic 3 and Knuckles into a comic form turns out pretty good a lot of the time.
Yeah, generally speaking.
I found my my own 6-part script for it that I wrote when I was about 20 or something that me and Abby were going to draw back in the day. I might post it somewhere. It's not bad.
Is it the Angel Island story?
No, that is something STC will forever have over Archie, because they never did a proper Sonic 3 and Knuckles adaptation. They broke it up in a weird way to introduce Knuckles, and then did their own Death Egg story, which was basically Sonic 2 instead. And so they just completely dropped the ball on that. Long live STC.
I can't believe it. I don't know why they weren't interested in doing Sonic right. Sorry, it's mostly Bants.
And here we are with our final comic, Sonic 290. This is definitely my favorite adaptation of Sonic CD in the comics. I love the art style and the pacing of the comic overall. The layouts are clean and they look just really, really good, especially around the middle with 3 pages that follow a repeating motif of 4 rectangular boxes per page. It really helps show Sonic's actions and speed, while also really showcasing each zone quickly and efficiently. It's a fun way to not get into the minutia of here's this zone, and then here's this zone. You just go bam, 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 and it just works out so great. I also really enjoy the huge 1-page spread of Sonic and Metal Sonic's race in Stardust Speedway. It's just cartoony looking, but it also has a lot of fun little details in it. Sonic's face changes in a lot of really great ways, and I'm always a big fan of that, especially in the comics. Metal Sonic himself looks the least intimidating in this style as opposed to the other 2 comics being talked about today, but I still think he looks really cool. He's kind of got that old Sonic style pudginess to him. And I gotta mention how cool it is to see the intro animation of the game referenced and sort of redrawn as the intro to the comic. It's such a standout piece of animation. Like I said, when we talked about Sonic CD, I watched that intro animation over and over and over again. So it's cool to see it not only paid homage, but redrawn in the style of late Archie. It's a lot of fun. As far as the writing goes, I enjoyed it a lot. I love that they nodded to Amy's card reading that was in the game's manual, and I really loved the fact that Robotnik just accidentally reveals his plan, because it's a really fun twist on the whole big villain monologue trope. I also thought it was legitimately funny that when Amy got kidnapped, Sonic's first thought was, wow, Metal Sonic's fast. He wanted to see how fast he was, and he got excited about that. I know that, Sonic's always had this sort of push and pull, mostly push, relationship with Amy, but it's still funny to see it in that context. Overall, I thought this adaptation was just really satisfying to read and look at. It is definitely one of my favorites, and honestly, I'm probably going to read it again sometime soon because it's just fun to look at.
It is interesting seeing them handle Sonic CD properly this time, but when you actually look at 25 and how they had Amy Rose in it, I'm surprised that she made it in, considering that how the US manual for Sonic CD actually was.
They called her Princess Sally, right?
Oh, yes.
Did you hear about that, Dave? That Princess Sally was in the place.
They just incorrectly, or they just thought, oh, let's do some brand synergy here. That's a girl. We've got a girl. Let's just name her Sally Acorn or Princess Sally in our manual, right?
Let me just bring it up. I think I actually had them on standby because these are fun to read.
These are the kind of things that we always have on standby just because it's always we know we're going to go off on tangents like this.
Sally. It's way more involved than I thought. I thought they just did a name swap.
Yeah.
Right.
Sally, the beautiful young squirrel plodding after him in knee-high blue boots. He grinned at her. No, wait, Sal, there's no time to waste. But the thing is, right, that's really weird. Because I thought what it was that they went, okay, for brand synergy, that pink hedgehog we're going to call Sally.
Right.
Or Princess Sally, or Sally Acorn, or one of those. No, they are going on about a squirrel in knee-high blue boots, none of which is...
Yeah, no, yeah. They did not just Control-F Amy replaced with Sally.
They're just being wrong.
You should see how they end the second page. Yeah. It's pretty wild.
It was a choice.
Second page. Oh, wow. Oh! Okay. Right. Okay, then. Bye, then. I'm going. You got me. Okay, right. This is one of those. This is one of your littles.
Dave, I have bad news for you.
I can't even...
That concept art was also fake.
Yeah, no, clearly.
As was that issue of Archie Sonic.
Right. What? How many things were fake?
We'll never tell.
So Skillet's fake.
Skillet's fake. Knuckles as the eyes is fake. That entire Archie storyline I came up with was fake.
The one you were telling me about where they make duplicate Metal Sonics.
Yep.
Oh, you japery people. You're just a load of japery people is what you are. Sorry, listeners, what finally clued me in was that as I was reading through this completely fake page of the manual, it turns out, all that stuff about knee-high blue boots, it ends in... That's what you think, Robotnik, Sonic called out before pulling out his signature Smith & Wesson pistol, flaunting his God-given right to bear arms. Oh, in that moment.
It's an American manual, Dave.
Yeah, no fair.
We are very crazy about that sort of thing.
I'm not trying to personally save face when I say this, but as soon as these guys told me that you were on board to guest, they immediately started hatching this, and I said, I'll just stay quiet. You guys go as long as possible.
Oh, did you have any more, or was that the? Is that the?
Those were the three.
It was the rule of three.
Good.
Yes, Luke did come out. He went out of his way to draw some panels from the fake Archie story.
Oh, show me!
Yeah, unfortunately, I did not get a chance to use these.
Show me! Oh, so the Emperor thing that he was
like
in.
I came up with this whole story about how Ian wanted to do STC, but he couldn't be too specific, so he's like, I'm going to stick in a line about he's Emperor of all Cive, but I can't call him Emperor Metallix. And I came up with all this concept where concept art, you got to start with the most extreme thing and then work your way backwards to find what the client's comfortable with. So I started out by having Tracy draw old tails with only one tail, and then Sega said no, and we worked backwards from there.
You went very elaborate with this description.
And then I also found ways to tie in, okay, what can I tie it in with actual Archie issues to make it sound real? So it's like, after this, Metal gets found by Uncle Chuck and turned back into Shard, the Metal Sonic.
I might have believed that, yeah. So what are you holding up in that photo? Did you just print it out and put it in a baggie?
Yeah, no, I printed out, Chris drew the cover, I printed it out and put it inside, on top of an actual issue inside one of my boards.
That's way too much work for this!
Yes, it is. That's why we did it.
For an audio medium that no one's going to be able to appreciate.
I told them, I said, please, we have to at least use this in the thumbnail for the episode because y'all are going insane.
What I am looking at, guys, is a believable picture of someone holding a copy of Archie in a comic bag. This is the one with the sort of platform thing that's like the Emperor Metallix one, but legally distinct. It's enough that it could have been what they did. Because what they've based this prank around is that I will believe that Archie did a load of old stupid nonsense, and they were right to do that.
I mean, we were serious about them, getting a talking to after sneaking in SCC characters. That is an actual thing. So.
I know, yes.
Yeah, we mixed in some truth with the lies. That's the best way to do this sort of thing.
I don't think I would have believed this Dr. Eggman is alive page.
No, I never finished the shading on that one.
Right.
And this isn't even these aren't even the ones that you saved compressed as bad JPEGs
brilliant.
to again hide some
Dave, I'll be honest, I was expecting you to call us out earlier, but the fact that you weren't along with okay, we'll move on to the next one later.
Where did you think I would call him?
I don't know. I just thought early on you would get sick of us talking about it.
I'm very polite. I did. I got very sick of you talking about it.
Well, you're British like that.
Thank you, yeah.
Maybe that was why I was a little nervous. Here it is, famous Sonic podcaster Dave Bulmer coming on our show, and y'all are going to fucking torture him over the course of the
I'm just going to gaslight him over the whole episode.
That is well on brand. I am extremely on board with that sort of thing. I've been led down a very merry garden path. Do you know what's really annoying? Is I've seen Falero post those before.
Yes, that is what spurred
That's
this. Is he shared the old ones, like the what was specific one, the one man extra life and all that.
Yeah,
he came up with.
Basically, having the version of the European manuals where they use all those wrong terms from the Sonic quiz, like Toxo for Mega Mac.
You got me with that as well.
Yeah.
I just can't count on you to pay attention to things.
Exactly, that's the thing. Yeah, base a prank around the fact that I'm not really listening.
I cannot think of a better note to end this episode on.
Honestly, cannot thank you enough for playing along and guesting on our conversation, Dave.
This has been a delight.
Yeah, it's been a
blast.
Thank you. I'll come on again. This was good fun.
Oh, for certain. I am curious if this has at all convinced you to read more Archie.
Sort of, because I've always had it in me to want to read Archie. I do remember being an excited 15-year-old finding out about it for the first time and getting them sent to me by American friends, and I've even got some of them in the other room that were sent to me then, and I have that feeling of excitement. I remember getting I got mail from America. Have you ever heard of that place, America, the one on TV? I've got some mail from it back when that was still exciting. And sitting in the car after school, having fizzed all day waiting to read them and reading them and getting through them. And they're not good, though, are they?
They take a while to get good.
Near the beginning, you mentioned you'd recorded something with Bobby Schroeder, who runs the Thanks Ken Penders blog. And not only are her articles and her writing on that blog very good, just objectively good writing, it might be what I would point people towards as far as you can experience the parts of Archie that are silly without having to read all of those
definitely.
books. And then when they start to get good, just pick up those books.
Absolutely, yeah. And I do still have a soft spot for like what people thought of it. Like, because when I was first getting on the internet, I was just before Endgame, and people would get like there was fear in the air. People were like they thought the series was ending, as did the people making it. Yeah. And it seemed like finally, like they killed Sally. It was if you weren't there, you don't know how big that was and how controversial it was.
Oh my goodness, that really is that is when you talk about like formative memories of your childhood. I do distinctly remember the countdown to that and getting that first part of that, and I was, gosh, what? 8, 9 years old, and yes, it was the most dramatic thing that I had ever encountered in my life.
And they did a Sonic movie on it. All the fans all hated it, so they did it again and they re-released it, but like with like more pages to explain the story.
Yeah,
this time.
the director's cut.
cut.
Oh, Sonic, as before, so ever.
Now, again, like you said, the story itself, outside of that, the great art and ever, is rubbish. It's garbage. It's bad. It ends with a cool Sonic Robotnik fight, but, you know, like you said, you cannot erase those formative memories, so...
Yeah, I'm not tainted by that nostalgia.
No.
I looked back on that as an adult, and I was like, "Wow!"
I read the first part as a kid and was so traumatized I never read the other 3 parts.
Yes, I'll read Archie one day. Of course, I will. I nearly spent. There was like, you know, those little digest books they brought out of it.
Yeah.
I nearly bought the complete collection for like 80-some quid on eBay, and I just didn't feel confident in spending that amount of money on something I wasn't going to enjoy. and then it got delisted and then relisted, and I nearly bought it, and then delisted and relisted and nearly bought, and then somebody else bought it. So that and those were in the UK, so like, you know, I can't afford them from America, like, do you know what I mean? Because of the post-Brexit postage and packaging.
Well, now we can ethically pirate them.
Yeah, it's a really good idea for you to read Archie, so no one can pull a prank on you like this again. So.
I don't know if that payoff is worth it. You know, I feel like, no, prank me a few more times and I don't have to read Archie. No, I will. By the way, I am not really as harsh on Archie as the joke is on STCTP. But also,
of course.
I'm tapping in. It's like how, you know, whatever side of the console war you were on, if that was a thing you were involved in. I wasn't. I was on both sides. But if you were, you're always going to joke about it, and you're always secretly going to believe it for the rest of your life. I'm like that with Archie. I am joking about how anti-Archie I am, but I remember when I was. It's always going to be in my DNA somewhere. It's the team I'm on, as it were. If anyone gets upset, I'm talking about the Pender Zero, not talking about when Ian Flint took over. I wasn't paying any attention by then.
You're talking about whatever ones they also don't like.
Exactly.
Well, it's what ran concurrently with STC. But yeah, basically.
Yeah, that will just about do things for this episode. So you can find me on Twitter at Cyberlink420.
You can find me on Twitter at GreatJobJeremy. That's GR and the number 8.
And you can find me on Twitter at Falero. That's FAULERRO. I think that's how it goes.
And Dave, since you are a guest, would you mind plugging your socials and any other projects you've got going?
All right. Well, so my name is Dave Bulmer. You'll find me on Twitter at Demon Tomato Dave, blithering on all day, and I'm a YouTuber of old. So you can find me on YouTube. Same Demon Tomato Dave. I'm Demon Tomato Dave everywhere. But the main thing I do that your listeners will be interested in is that every 2 weeks I put out another episode of Sonic the Comic, the podcast, with my co-host Chris McFeely off of Transformers The Basics on YouTube. And we are 2 elderly gentlemen who remember exactly what it was like to be reading the old version of Sonic, the original version of Sonic from before they changed everything to the way it is now. Over here in Britain, we had our own comic that depicted things a little bit more closely to the games than you might have found elsewhere. And we are really going to town making sure that we put you in that space. So we don't skip the adverts. We don't skip the letters. We don't even skip the fan art. We describe it all to you over an audio medium. And at any point when an advert mentions, I don't know, certain gifts that you used to be able to get free with a pack of Kellogg's Frosties, which is British for Frosted Flakes, we will go into great detail telling you about our memories of those things and what it was like, but we try and put you there. It's not just like I remember I had that. It was nice. No, we take you by the lapels and we shake you about and we throw you down the pit into 1990s 3 to 6, and we put the adverts, TV adverts, we play them, theme tunes, we put them on, we put all the music in. It's very, very edited and it's a soundscape. And if you listen to episode 8, where we cover the origin story of Sonic, you've heard of it, Kinterbor, all of that.
Yep.
We do it as like a full audio drama and everything. I really, really went to town editing a soundscape of sound effects for you to live inside. So, Sonic the Comic, the podcast, I really think if you like this, you'll like that. You'll find it at STCTP, Sonic the Comic, the podcast, stctp.wigglehe.com. Sorry, that's for my own reasons. But just search for it, Sonic the Comic, the podcast, or nip onto Twitter. It's at Sonic Podcast. Yeah, eat that. Sorry to everybody else with a Sonic podcast, but we managed to get at Sonic Podcast on Twitter. We were absolutely in 2019. Nobody had that yet. What the hell?
I don't even know.
What the hell? Nobody had registered at Sonic. Anyway, so yeah, see you there.
And the theme tune is synchronized by Sonic the Comic, the band.
That's right. Yeah, a real band.
I cannot thank you enough for being our guest, and I cannot recommend enough that people listen to STC TP. I think it would be hard for me to deny that without that, like, we would not also be inspired to get all of our old asses together to talk about Sonic things we like. And it genuinely has been a delight as someone who did not grow up with Sonic the Comic to experience it for the first time, reading them and then listening to you guys who have such genuine fun and admiration. And like you said, you really do like pull it into an experience of going back into the 90s. And even if it is like, you know, I am an American and am kind of divorced from a lot of the British pop culture, it is so fun to experience that secondhand. So absolutely people should check that out if they have any curiosity, passing liking for Sonic in general.
I'm absolutely in the same boat. Like, I didn't used to know who Mr. Blobby was, and now I'm as traumatized as the rest of you.
He was great, though.
In the comic, they'll just mention, because there's pop culture references in it, like there is in Archie, like there's in everything. And if they mention something that we're like, the Americans listening won't know about that, we will do a deep dive. Like, there are British people who didn't know it as much about Mr. Blobby as we tell you in that episode. Like,
and the rest of us are all the more appreciative for it.
It's good stuff. It's good stuff.
Speaking on a personal level, as someone who did grow up with STC in England, man, it's not just a fun podcast, it's a validating podcast. It's actually made me feel a little more secure about myself as an STC fan. Good. Because for the longest time, you were like, people say, oh, Fleetway, the weird one. God. And it's like, no, but it was good though, but you get gaslit by it for a while. You're like, you know, maybe he was an asshole.
How is Fleetway the weird one when the one that's considered the normal one is as much about a cowardly Frenchman as it is about Sonic the Hedgehog?
I don't think that Archie fans have room to call Fleetway the weird one when, and I quote, had a bad dream, better microwave the baby.
Yeah, we never did that.
That's how Knuckles came about.
But it is just a glimpse of what it's like, not just to be a Sonic fan at that time, but to be a kid in the 90s, growing up with all this sort of stuff, because so much of our nostalgia has been replaced by American stuff. Sorry, American friends, but it's true. We called it the NES, by the way.
There was no video game crash. We all just carried on merrily playing games. We had Dizzy. When you had a video game crash, we had Dizzy and Chucky Egg, and we were happy.
You and your Amigas.
I suppose we didn't have Dizzy yet. That's wrong. But yes. Oh, there's a lot of Amiga content. Yeah, no, we're trying to redress the fact that in the early days of when the ancient texts were written in the early Sonic internet, Americans had free internet access and we had to pay by the minute. So it's all American. And so we're trying to redress that and be like, no, this was happening then too. It's just as valid. It's better, and it's just as good. What? There I am going like, our comic's so good. Have you seen what's happening? Running wild, supersonic. Look, it's amazing. It's very. Meanwhile, the Americans are going like, we hate this. Sally's being killed. This is awful. And that's the main one. No, we have redressed this balance, and we're trying to make a like ultimate compendium of this comic, and I think we're succeeding. We've just passed our 3rd birthday, and we're in the 4th year of the podcast, and like that's a lot of podcast.
Yeah.
Foof. So yeah, come and join us. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, as somebody who has largely been ignorant to that side of the story, it has been a delight learning about all that stuff.
Lovely.
Yeah, come along and learn the value of a pound coin, Dave.
Oh yeah. Some of you guys like listening to this will have seen that animation without knowing what it is.
Yep.
Speaking of theme songs, special thanks as always to Amy Waters for our theme song from the album Gotta Go Slow. You can find more of her work on YouTube and Bandcamp. And also, I believe Jake has a little something to say.
Hey, just wanted to sneak into the podcast one more time. I wanted to say, Dave, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. It's a bummer that I didn't get to be there live with all of y'all at the same time, but hopefully we'll have you back on the podcast soon, and you and I will be able to actually converse and talk back and forth with each other. And I imagine it's just going to be a super fun time. Again, thank you, and keep doing Sonic the Comic, the podcast. I'm a big fan now.
Thank you. Brilliant.
Converting the youth.
Yep.
Dave isn't even that young. We just treat him like
That said, though, Jake will be here for our next episode, which is going to get controversial because we're going into what I think a lot of people consider the start of the dark times. Oh. We're going to be taking a look back at the one and only Sonic Heroes.
Oh, we go from all this good Metal Sonic stuff to that.
That was the moment that I stepped off buying Sonic games. That was it. That game was why I wasn't a Sonic fan for a long time.
I'm interested to not only go back and play it, but also like research. Like for the first time in my life, I've actually looked up like the development history of some of these games, and I also think for good and bad reasons that it was a turn for the development of Sonic games with Heroes. But I think it'll be interesting to talk about that. We opened the whole podcast talking about the adventure titles and mostly our good feelings about them. And now I'm ready to explore some complicated nostalgia with some of these games. But it'll be fun.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. But until next time, I've been Cyberlink.
I'm Game Buddy.
I'm Valero.
And I'm Dave Bulmer. Die, furry scum!
Of course.
Oh, thank you again, Dave.
No problem.